What if the stories we dismissed as mere fantasy were actually keys to understanding our world? Picture a time when the rustling in the ancient forest wasn't just the wind, but the presence of a guardian spirit, or when the strange shape in the ocean depths wasn't a trick of the light, but a primordial beast from the dawn of creation. For centuries, we've drawn a firm line between myth and reality, placing the creatures of legend firmly in the realm of imagination. But what if that line is an illusion? What if these beings, these 24 forgotten creatures, were never truly forgotten, but simply waiting for us to listen to the secrets they carry about our own history, our psychology, and our planet? The legendary astronomer Carl Sagan once said that somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. That sentiment captures the very heart of our journey today, a journey not into fiction, but into a hidden layer of our own reality, one populated by beings that have shaped cultures, guided explorers, and even foreshadowed scientific discoveries. These are not just monsters from a fairy tale. They are complex symbols, each one a reflection of the human experience. They embody our deepest fears of the unknown and our highest hopes for protection and meaning. They served as early explanations for natural phenomena we couldn't yet understand, from the rumble of thunder to the sudden onset of disease. In their forms, a serpent with a head at each end, a bird that absorbs sickness, a lizard that dances in flames, we see humanity's first attempts to make sense of a vast and often bewildering world. They are the original code, the ancient language we use to describe everything from the chaos of creation to the delicate balance of the ecosystem. By rediscovering them, we aren't just indulging in nostalgia, we are reclaiming a vital part of our collective consciousness. We are learning how our ancestors viewed their place in the cosmos, and in doing so, gaining a fresh perspective on the challenges we face today, from environmental crises to our own search for identity. This video is an invitation to embark on that reclamation. We will travel across continents and through millennia to meet 24 of these extraordinary beings. We will uncover their origins in dusty manuscripts and oral traditions, decode the rich symbolism woven into their very essence, and reveal the surprising ways they build a bridge between ancient belief systems and modern scientific inquiry. Each creature we encounter is a piece of a grander puzzle, a thread in the tapestry of human knowledge. You will discover how a mythical beast can influence the design of a modern emblem, how a folkloric warning can contain a lesson in ecological stewardship, and how a story told to children around a fire can hold profound psychological truth. So get ready to have your perceptions challenged and your curiosity ignited. This is more than a list, it is an adventure into the blurred boundaries of our world, where every forgotten creature holds a key to a deeper truth. Let's begin by asking a fundamental question. What does it truly mean for a creature to be lost to time, and why does bringing it back into the light matter so much for us right now? Picture a serpent unlike any other, a creature born from the very essence of contradiction. With a head at each end of its body, the Amphispina slithers through the annals of ancient Greek and Roman literature, a living symbol of duality and the endless cycles that govern existence. Its very name, derived from the Greek word's meaning, goes both ways, perfectly captures its nature. This was not merely a monster, but a profound representation of the eternal struggle between opposing forces, life and death, good and evil, creation and destruction. The mythographer Joseph Campbell once observed that myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths. In this light, the Amphispina emerges as a powerful embodiment of our most universal human fears and aspirations, a creature that gave tangible form to the abstract conflicts we all face. The Amphispina's journey begins with the Greek poets, who described it as a beast born from the blood of the Gorgon Medusa, a lineage that immediately ties it to themes of terrifying power and transformation. It later found an enduring home in the illuminated pages of medieval bestiaries, those fascinating encyclopedias of the natural and the supernatural. In these texts, the Amphispina was often credited with protective qualities, believed to be a potent charm against snake venom and poison. This dual role, as both a fearsome creature and a benevolent guardian, highlights its core symbolism of balance. Its anatomical peculiarity was said to allow it to move with effortless grace in either direction, a physical manifestation of ambiguity and the idea that every path holds both promise and peril. This ability to navigate the world without a fixed front or back made it a perfect metaphor for the complex, often contradictory, nature of life itself. One of the most detailed early accounts comes from the Roman scholar Pliny the Elder in his monumental work, Natural History. Pliny described the Amphispina not just as a serpent of legend, but as a real creature of Libya, attributing to it a fluid mobility that captivated the classical mind. Centuries later, this symbol was adopted into the world of heraldry, where it coiled its way onto coats of arms as an emblem of vigilance and the defense of one's realm from all directions. Beyond its physical descriptions, the Amphispina holds a deep psychological resonance. It can be interpreted as a representation of our own internal conflicts, the warring halves of our psyche that pull us in opposite directions. During the Renaissance, artists frequently used the image of the Amphispina to illustrate the concept of Janus-faced decisions, named for the two-faced Roman god. In these artworks, the creature mirrored the real-life dilemmas of rulers and philosophers, where a single choice could have consequences rippling out in two entirely different ways, demanding a wisdom that looks simultaneously to the past and the future. So what does the persistent fascination with such a bizarre creature tell us about ourselves? It speaks to a fundamental human need to personify the abstract, to clothe our deepest anxieties and philosophical quandaries in a form we can see and describe. The Amphispina's legacy is a challenge to embrace complexity, to acknowledge that life is rarely a straightforward path, and that true understanding often requires us to hold two opposing ideas in our minds at the same time. It teaches us that the world is not simply black and white, but a spectrum of interconnected dualities. Now, let us turn our attention from the serpent of duality to a being of pure, radiant hope. Imagine a bird of the most brilliant white, a creature so pristine it was said to live only in the courts of kings. This is the Caladrius, a figure from Roman mythology whose very presence was a balm to the suffering. The legend tells us that this extraordinary bird possessed a profound and merciful power. When brought to the bedside of an ailing person, it would gaze into their eyes. If the patient was destined to recover, the Caladrius would meet their gaze and, in a miraculous act, absorb the sickness directly into its own body. It would then fly straight toward the sun, where the disease would be burned away and scattered into the air, leaving the patient healed and the bird purified once more. But if the Caladrius turned its head away, refusing to look at the afflicted, it was a silent prophecy of an inevitable death. This was not a creature of malice, but one of truth, offering a clear-eyed prognosis in an age of medical uncertainty. The origins of the Caladrius extend deep into ancient medical and spiritual traditions, and its story was powerfully adopted and adapted by early Christian writers. In bestiaries, those beautifully illustrated medieval books of beasts, the Caladrius became a potent allegory for Christ himself. Scholars like Saint Augustine saw in its pure white plumage a symbol of divine innocence and its healing flight a representation of the resurrection, where Christ took upon himself the sins of humanity and ascended to heaven. This transformation from a pagan symbol to a Christian icon shows how seamlessly myth can be woven into the fabric of faith, providing a tangible image for abstract spiritual concepts. The bird became a divine messenger, its actions mirroring the hope of spiritual cleansing and physical redemption. It stood as a testament to the belief that healing was not merely a physical process, but a sacred one, intertwining the fate of the body with the state of the soul. Within the world of medieval medicine, the Caladrius represented an almost idealized version of diagnosis and cure. Its legend intersected with the prevailing humoral theory, which understood health as a balance of 4 bodily fluids. The bird's ability to draw out sickness resonated with practices like bloodletting or purging, which aimed to remove excess or corrupted humors from the body. In this context, the Caladrius was the perfect physician. It could diagnose with a single look and cure without invasive procedures. Its image graced the pages of illuminated manuscripts, often depicted in vibrant blues and golds, perched serenely on a sict, a visual anchor of hope in a time when medical knowledge was limited and often terrifying. These illustrations were not just decorative, they were instructional and inspirational, reinforcing the idea that a true healer must possess both diagnostic insight and compassionate intent. One of the most poignant applications of this myth was within the walls of monastic hospitals. Here, monks and nuns who served as caregivers would have been familiar with the Caladrius as a symbol of their sacred duty. The creature's story inspired a holistic approach to medicine, one that sought to heal the spirit alongside the body. A patient's environment, their mental state, and their faith were considered just as important as any physical treatment. The Caladrius, in its silent, graceful action, modeled an empathetic connection between healer and patient, the power of a caring presence. This stands in stark contrast to the gradual fade of the legend with the dawn of the Enlightenment and the rise of empirical science. As doctors began to rely more on anatomy, chemistry, and measurable results, the symbolic bird of prophecy was relegated to the realm of superstition, a beautiful but outdated notion in a new world of clinical facts. Yet, the essence of the Caladrius raises a compelling question for our own time. In an era of advanced medical technology where diagnoses are delivered by machines and interactions can feel rushed, what might we learn from this ancient symbol? The Caladrius challenges us to remember that healing is more than just the eradication of disease. It is about the profound human connection at the heart of care. The bird's diagnostic gaze was not cold or detached, but intimate and full of meaning. It reminds us of the importance of empathy, of truly seeing the person who is ill, and of the role hope itself plays in recovery. Modern movements toward integrative and patient-centered care, which acknowledge the psychological and emotional dimensions of illness, echo the holistic ideal that the Caladrius represented for centuries. It speaks to an enduring human desire for symbols that bridge the vast gap between the tangible reality of sickness and the intangible power of hope, compassion, and the will to heal. Now, let us turn from the healing purity of the Caladrius to a creature born of flame and paradox. Imagine a humble lizard, not scurrying away from a burning log, but emerging from the very heart of the fire, unscathed and shimmering with an otherworldly coolness. This is the mythic Salamander, a being whose elemental mystique captivated the greatest minds of the ancient and medieval worlds. From the empirical observations of Aristotle to the alchemical dreams of Paracelsus, the salamander was revered not as a mere animal, but as a living embodiment of fire itself, a pure spirit of the most untamable element. Its legend is a fascinating story of misinterpretation, symbolic power, and the human drive to find wonder in the natural world, a drive that would ultimately pave the way for scientific discovery. The origins of this fiery myth are surprisingly practical. For centuries in rural Europe, when people would gather logs for their winter hearths, they would sometimes find small salamanders, the real, damp-skinned amphibians hiding within the damp, rotten wood. When these logs were tossed onto the fire, the intense heat would force the creatures to flee for their lives, scrambling out from the embers. To an observer, it appeared as if the lizard had been born from the flames themselves. This simple, repeated misunderstanding sparked a legend of immense proportions. The salamander was believed to be so cold-blooded that it could not only survive the fire, but could actually extinguish it with the chill of its own body. This incredible resilience made it a powerful symbol of transformation through adversity, an idea that resonated deeply in a world full of hardship. It represented the ability to pass through the most intense trials and emerge not just unharmed but purified and strengthened. This captivating notion was seized upon by the alchemists, the proto-scientists who sought to unlock the secrets of the universe. For them, the salamander was far more than a curious animal. It was a central symbol in their spiritual and practical quest. The legendary physician and alchemist Paracelsus, who saw the imagination as the sun in the soul of man, classified the salamander as an elemental being, a spirit of fire just as undines were spirits of water. In the intricate symbolism of alchemy, the salamander represented the volatile principle, the transformative power of heat that was essential for the great work, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. This mythical substance was said to grant immortality and turn base metals into gold, and the salamander, thriving in the alchemist's furnace, was the living proof that such a transformation was possible. It was the guardian of the sacred fire, a symbol of the soul's ability to withstand the purifying flames of spiritual refinement. In this way, the creature perfectly blurred the line between a physical entity and a metaphysical concept, its myth providing a tangible focus for abstract philosophical pursuits. The salamander's symbolic power extended far beyond the smoky laboratories of alchemists. It climbed the social ladder to the highest echelons of power, becoming a potent emblem in the world of heraldry. Kings and nobles, particularly during the Renaissance, adopted the salamander as a symbol of courage, faith, and unwavering resilience. A famous example is King Francis I of France, who used the salamander as his personal emblem, pairing it with the motto "I nourish and I extinguish." This clever phrase encapsulated the dual nature of a just ruler, the ability to nourish the good and the faithful while extinguishing the fires of rebellion and heresy. Adorning everything from palace walls to royal armor, the salamander motif was a continuous reminder of a leader's supposed ability to withstand the political and military fires that threatened their reign. It was a powerful piece of political propaganda, using a mythical creature to project an image of divine right and unshakable strength. This cultural prominence ensured the salamander a place in the literary canon. William Shakespeare, ever a master of symbolic resonance, referenced the creature in several of his plays. In The Tempest, the spirit Ariel sings of leading the protagonist through fire and flame, a direct nod to the salamander's legendary habitat. These references show how deeply the myth was woven into the common understanding of the time. An audience would have immediately grasped the symbolic weight of a creature that could walk through fire. However, the Age of Enlightenment brought with it a new spirit of empirical inquiry that began to dissect these long-held beliefs. Thinkers of the 17th and 18th centuries, armed with the scientific method, systematically debunked the myth. They correctly classified the salamander as a simple amphibian, explaining that its moist skin and mucus coating provided brief protection from heat, but certainly not immunity. The magical beast was reduced, in the eyes of science, to a common, if fascinating, woodland creature. Yet, the fall of the salamander from mythical elemental to common amphibian is not a story of defeat, but one of evolution. It teaches us a profound lesson about the human psyche, our innate tendency to mythologize the wonders of the natural world. Confronted with a strange and inexplicable event, a lizard crawling from a fire, our ancestors did not simply dismiss it. they built a grand narrative around it. They used that narrative to explore complex ideas about purity, resilience, power, and the very nature of reality. The legend of the salamander was a pre-scientific hypothesis, an attempt to explain a phenomenon with the tools and worldview available at the time. In doing so, it channeled a fundamental curiosity that is the very engine of science. The same sense of wonder that made a medieval scholar see a spirit in the flames is what drives a modern biologist to study the salamander's unique biology. The myth was not a lie, it was the first step on a long path of inquiry, a testament to our endless desire to find meaning and magic in the world around us, pushing us to look closer and understand more deeply. Leaving the untamed forests and their enchanting spirits behind, we now cross the threshold into the very heart of the home. In the warm, dim light of a traditional Slavic cottage, imagine a small, bearded figure, more felt than seen, a quiet presence in the corner of the room. This is the Domovoy, the ultimate household guardian, a spirit that embodies the profound ancestral bond between a family and the dwelling they inhabit. Far more than a simple ghost or fairy, the Domovoy was considered a deified ancestor, the soul of the first founder of the household, who remained tethered to the land and the lineage, watching over his descendants with a stern but caring eye. His mood was the barometer of the home's fortune. A content Domovoy meant thriving livestock, successful harvests, and a general sense of harmony. But a neglected or offended Domovoy could turn the house upside down, hiding belongings, making noises in the night, or even pinching the family members as they slept. This creature wasn't just a superstition, it was a fundamental part of the domestic ecosystem, a spiritual entity that required regular offerings of bread, salt, or a bowl of milk left out at night to maintain the delicate balance of the home. The Russian folklorist Vladimir Prop profoundly noted that such mythical beings encode social norms, and the Domovoy is a perfect example of this principle in action. This spirit served as a cultural enforcer of community values, a supernatural overseer of moral conduct within the private sphere, a hard-working family who kept a clean house and treated each other with respect could expect the Domovoy's benevolence. He was said to quietly help with chores, groom the horses at night, and warn the family of impending danger by touching them with a soft, furry paw or groaning from behind the stove. Conversely, laziness, drunkenness, or constant arguing would incur his wrath. He might sour the milk, tangle the yarn, or let the livestock fall ill. This dual nature as both benevolent helper and mischievous trickster created a powerful feedback loop. Good behavior was rewarded and bad behavior was punished, not by a distant god or a village elder, but by an ever-present member of the household itself. This system internalized social control, making morality a matter of daily, practical consequence under the watchful eye of a being who was, in essence, the home itself. This ancient belief, rooted in pre-Christian Slavic paganism, demonstrated a remarkable resilience by persisting for centuries even after the arrival of Orthodox Christianity. Through a process known as syncretism, the Domovoy was not erased but rather absorbed and adapted. He was often quietly reinterpreted as a guardian angel of the home or a less powerful, but still respected domestic spirit that coexisted with the Christian God. People still whispered prayers to him and left their offerings, now perhaps with a quick sign of the cross. His legend also expanded to include a family. In many regions, the Domovoy was said to have a female counterpart, the Kikamora. While the Domovoy concerned himself with the yard, the livestock, and the male domains of work, the Kikamora was the spirit of the indoor, feminine sphere, spinning, weaving, and watching over the children. A happy Kikamora ensured a well-run household, but an unhappy one could be a true terror, tangling thread, breaking pottery, and harassing the woman of the house. This division of spiritual labor mirrored the very real division of labor in a peasant household, showing how myth reflects the structure of daily life. The rituals surrounding the Domovoy were deeply ingrained in Slavic culture, and some practices survived well into the modern era. One of the most poignant was the tradition of inviting the Domovoy when a family moved to a new home. The process was a solemn affair. The head of the household would go to the old home's hearth, the traditional dwelling place of the spirit, and formally invite him to come along. He might place a loaf of bread in the oven or sweep the ashes from the old stove into a cloth to carry to the new one, symbolically transferring the spirit's essence. Upon arrival at the new dwelling, the family would leave out a special offering, often the first slice of bread from their first meal, and formally welcome the Domovoy to his new abode. This ritual ensured the continuity of protection and blessing, a spiritual thread connecting the family's past to its future. It's a tradition that finds a powerful echo in our own contemporary housewarming parties, where we invite friends and family to bless a new home with their presence and good wishes, creating a new form of communal protection and belonging. So, what does this small, bearded spirit from Eastern European folklore reveal about our universal human anxieties? The Domovoy, at its core, is a profound expression of our deepest fears and hopes surrounding the concept of home. A home is more than just a building. It is a sanctuary, a repository of memory, and the center of our security. The fear of this sanctuary being violated, of chaos invading our ordered lives, is a fundamental human anxiety. The Domovoy myth gave a face and a name to that fear, but it also provided a way to manage it. By personifying the spirit of the home itself, our ancestors created a relationship with their own dwelling. They could actively work to maintain harmony through small rituals and good conduct. The Domovoy transformed the abstract, terrifying possibility of random misfortune into something manageable, something that could be appeased and negotiated with. It answered the unsettling question of why do bad things happen here, with a clear, if supernatural, answer: because the home itself is displeased. In this way, the Domovoy is a timeless figure, bridging ancient fears with our modern domestic lives. He reminds us that a home is a living entity, shaped by the energy, care, and respect of those who live within it, and that the desire for a protected, harmonious haven is a thread that connects us across centuries and cultures. From the intimate, firelit world of the household guardian, we now set sail into the vast and terrifying expanse of the open ocean. Medieval mariners navigated a world of immense uncertainty, where the horizon held not just the promise of new lands, but the threat of unimaginable horrors. Among the most chilling was the Aspidochelone, a creature of such colossal scale that its very form was a masterclass in deception. Imagine a seasoned sailor, weeks into a voyage, spotting a welcome patch of land on the horizon, a small island dotted with what appears to be trees and covered in inviting soil. Desperate for fresh water and a respite from the relentless waves, the crew would steer their ship toward this sanctuary, only to discover, too late, that the ground beneath their feet was not earth at all, but the living, leathery back of a monstrous beast. As they lit cooking fires on its hide, the agonizing heat would stir the creature from its slumber. With a cataclysmic lurch, the false island would submerge, dragging the ship and all its crew into the crushing, lightless depths. This was not merely a sea monster, it was a predatory illusion, a symbol of the ocean's cruelest trickery. The legend of the Aspidochelone, whose name loosely translates from Greek as shield turtle, has deep roots that intertwine across cultures. It first surfaces in the Greek text, the Physiologus, a foundational work of early Christian allegory that described the natural world as a book filled with moral and spiritual lessons. In this context, the Aspidochelone was explicitly presented as a metaphor for Satan. Just as the beasts inviting back lured sailors to their doom, so too could the devil disguise temptation as a safe harbor, ensnaring the souls of the unwary in a vast and unpredictable world. This allegorical interpretation gave the creature a potent theological weight, transforming a seafaring hazard into a cautionary tale about spiritual vigilance. The myth was then enriched by Arabic legends, where it appeared as the Zaratan, a giant turtle that slept on the ocean's surface. These cross-cultural parallels reveal a universal experience among ancient mariners: the constant, gnawing fear of the unknown and the human tendency to personify the most dangerous aspects of the natural world into a tangible, monstrous form. As the centuries progressed, more naturalistic explanations began to emerge from scholars who sought to reconcile these fantastical tales with observable reality. The influential natural philosopher Albertus Magnus, writing in the 13th century, speculated rationally that such myths likely arose from the misidentification of very real, if equally astounding, marine animals. A sleeping whale, such as a sperm whale seen from a distance, could easily be mistaken for a small island, especially if its rough, barnacle-encrusted skin had accumulated driftwood and floating vegetation. Similarly, the occasional sighting of a giant leatherback turtle, one of the largest reptiles on Earth, could have fueled the legend of the Zaratan. These weren't simply wild fantasies. They were pre-scientific attempts to make sense of genuine, bewildering encounters. The Aspidochelone represents a critical point where direct observation collided with a limited understanding of marine biology, resulting in a story that was as much about the limits of human knowledge as it was about the monster itself. This creature's influence extended far beyond campfire tales and bestiaries. It literally found its way onto the maps of the era. In the age of exploration, cartographers would often mark the uncharted regions of their sea charts with the chilling phrase, "Here be dragons," and the image of the Aspidochelone was a frequent inhabitant of these terrifying blanks. It served as a graphic symbol for the absolute limit of geographical knowledge, a warning that beyond a certain point, the known world gave way to a realm of peril and imagination. The creature became inextricably linked with the biblical Leviathan, the primordial sea monster of chaos, further cementing its role as an embodiment of the formless, untamable void that was the ocean. For seafaring cultures from the Vikings to the Mediterranean traders, stories of the Aspidochelone were more than just entertainment. They were vital pieces of oral tradition that served a practical purpose. They cautioned against greed and recklessness, the greed for a shortcut to riches that would push a captain into uncharted waters, and the recklessness of trusting a seemingly safe opportunity without proper caution. This lesson is powerfully echoed in later literary works like the Arabian Nights, where tales of magical islands that vanish or transform into sea djinn serve the same narrative function, to warn the adventurer that not all that glitters is gold, and that a seemingly easy path can often lead to disaster. The enduring power of the Aspidochelone myth forces us to ask a profound question about our own psychology. Why do humans so consistently create monsters to explain natural phenomena? The answer lies in our deep-seated need for narrative and meaning. A random, tragic event, a ship vanishing without a trace in a calm sea, is psychologically unbearable in its arbitrariness. It is far more comforting, in a strange way, to attribute such a loss to the agency of a specific, monstrous being. A monster provides a story, a cause, and a focus for fear. It transforms a senseless accident into a dramatic confrontation, making the vast, impersonal power of the ocean something that can, in theory, be understood and even outsmarted. This ancient coping mechanism finds a startling parallel in our modern digital landscape. The Aspidochelone's deceptive island is not so different from the sophisticated illusions of our online world, the fake news website that looks legitimate, the phishing email that mimics a trusted institution, or the curated social media profile that presents a perfect but entirely false reality. These digital monsters lure us in with the promise of information, connection, or security, only to drag us into the depths of misinformation, fraud, or emotional manipulation. The Aspidochelone teaches us that the human mind, whether facing an uncharted ocean or an unregulated digital frontier, will always conjure monsters to embody its deepest anxieties about the unknown, and that the most dangerous threats are often the ones that look the most like safe harbor. After the treacherous deceptions of the deep, we arrive in the serene and ordered world of ancient China, where a creature of pure benevolence heralds the arrival of wisdom itself. Behold the Qilin, a magnificent and chimerical being that seems to have been woven together from the most gentle aspects of nature. Imagine the graceful body of a deer, covered not in fur but in the glistening, protective scales of a fish, with a single horn often adorning its head and the sturdy tail of an ox completing its majestic form. It moves with such gentleness that it is said to tread without even crushing a blade of grass, and it refuses to harm even the smallest living insect. This is no monster of fear, but a celestial omen, a living announcement that a time of peace, prosperity, and moral clarity is at hand. For centuries, the appearance of a Qilin was believed to signal the birth of a great sage or the rise of a just and virtuous ruler, its very presence a testament to the harmony between heaven and earth. The origins of the Qilin stretch back to the Zhou dynasty, where it first emerged in the cultural consciousness as one of the four noble, supernatural creatures, alongside the dragon, phoenix, and tortoise. Its legend is powerfully intertwined with the most pivotal figures in Chinese philosophy. Ancient texts like the Classic of Rites record that a Qilin appeared before the birth of Confucius, presenting a jade tablet that foretold the coming of the uncrowned king, whose teachings would shape civilization. When Confucius himself later saw a Qilin that had been killed by a hunter, he reportedly wept, interpreting it as an omen of his own impending death and the loss of wisdom in the world. His own statement that the Qilin is the prince of animals elevates the creature beyond mere myth and into the realm of ethical paragon. The Qilin embodied a core Confucian ideal. It was a being of supreme virtue that instinctively punished the wicked and spared the innocent, acting as a divine judge that required no laws or enforcement. This blending of myth with profound ethical teaching gave the Qilin a unique authority, making it a bridge between spiritual belief and the practical governance of human conduct. This symbolic power did not remain confined to philosophical texts. It actively blurred the lines between myth and reality by influencing the very machinery of state. Throughout Chinese history, reported sightings of the Qilin were treated as momentous political events. Emperors, particularly those founding new dynasties, would often claim that a Qilin had been seen as a heavenly endorsement of their mandate to rule. These sightings were meticulously recorded in court chronicles and could lead to imperial decrees, such as the declaration of amnesties for prisoners or the inauguration of new era names, all designed to align the realm with the perceived cosmic blessing. The creature's image became a vital tool of statecraft, woven into the fabric of imperial art and ceremony. During the Ming dynasty, for example, Qilin imagery was a cornerstone of diplomatic soft power. Embroidered on the silken robes of envoys and carved into gifts for foreign tributary states, the Qilin projected an image of China as a benevolent, peaceful, and morally superior civilization. It was a silent, powerful message to rival powers. This is a land governed by virtue, not mere brute force. This strategic use of myth to shape international perception finds a clear parallel in how modern nations deploy symbols, from the olive branch of peace to the bald eagle of strength, in their own diplomatic and branding efforts. The cultural journey of the Qilin did not stop at China's borders. It traveled across East Asia, adapting and evolving while retaining its core symbolism of good fortune. In Japan, it became known as the Kirin, a creature often depicted as more deer-like, sometimes with a single horn and a body enveloped in flame, symbolizing brilliant and unwavering justice. It became a protective figure adorning temples and shrines. In Korea, the Jiren holds a similar place in folklore, revered as a sacred being that appears only in lands blessed with wise leadership. This cross-cultural adoption demonstrates how a powerful mythological idea can be seamlessly integrated into different national identities, yet still serve a universal purpose: to represent the highest aspirations of a society. In our own time, the Qilin has experienced a vibrant resurgence in global pop culture. It appears as a beloved creature in fantasy films and video games, a symbol of harmony and magical goodness. Perhaps one of the most widely recognized modern adaptations is in the name of the popular Kirin beer, which consciously uses the creature's benevolent and auspicious connotations to brand its product as one of quality and good cheer. The enduring legacy of the Qilin forces us to consider a profound question about the relationship between storytelling and power. What does this gentle, virtuous creature reveal about the deep intersection of myth and governance? The answer lies in understanding that myths are not escapes from reality, but tools for building it. The Qilin provided a divine justification for authority, but it was a justification rooted in a specific moral code. An emperor who claimed the Qilin's favor was also implicitly accepting the burden of ruling with compassion, integrity, and justice. The myth created a system of accountability where the health of the state was measured against a celestial standard. It was a narrative that guided societal values, teaching people to venerate wisdom, reward virtue, and expect their leaders to embody these principles. In a world without modern political science, the Qilin was a powerful, accessible story that explained what good leadership should look like and where its legitimacy truly originated. It demonstrates that long before focus groups and political slogans, civilizations were using the profound language of myth to articulate their ideals, inspire their people, and project their identity to the world, proving that the most enduring power is often that which is wrapped in a story of benevolence and grace. Now we descend from the celestial omens of the Qilin into the swirling, formless waters of a far more primal beginning. To understand the Aztec worldview, we must first meet the being from whose broken body the world was literally constructed, Cipactli. Imagine not a single creature, but a primordial chaos given form, a monstrous hybrid, part crocodile, part fish, with mouths gaping at every one of its joints. This was not a creature that lived in the world. It was the world in its raw, untamed potential, a being of pure, voracious energy swimming in the endless, dark waters that existed before time. The Aztec creation myth, powerfully depicted in texts like the Codex Borgia, tells a story of cosmic necessity. The gods Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl looked upon this chaotic sea and knew that for an ordered world to exist, the chaotic Cipactli had to be subdued. They descended, grappled with the colossal beast, and in a tremendous act of creative violence tore its body in two. One half they flung upward to become the sky, the other they pressed downward to become the earth. Every mountain, every valley, every river was formed from its dismembered parts. In this single, profound narrative, Cipactli embodies the most fundamental truth of existence, that creation is always and forever born from a necessary act of destruction. This myth was far more than a simple story for the Aztecs. It was a foundational principle that explained the very nature of their reality. As the renowned scholar of Nahuatl thought Miguel Leon Portilla expressed, myth is the language of the sacred. The story of Cipactli was this sacred language in action, a way to ground immense abstract concepts like chaos, sacrifice, and cyclical renewal in a tangible, visceral image that everyone could understand. Why did the seasons change? Why did the rains come and cause the rivers to flood, nourishing the crops? Why was the harvest both a time of abundance and the death of the plants? The answers lay in the ongoing story of Cipactli. The earth itself was a sacred, living entity because it was made from a divine body. The floods were not merely weather, they were a reminder of the primordial sea from which life sprang. The act of planting a seed, which must die in the earth to give life to a new plant, was a small-scale echo of the great sacrifice that made the world possible. This cosmology created a world that was deeply alive and interconnected, where every natural event was part of a continuing dialogue between the creative and destructive forces that Cipactli represented. This belief in a cycle of destruction and renewal was not just philosophical, it was meticulously woven into the fabric of Aztec timekeeping and ritual. Cipactli was immortalized in the very structure of their calendar, the Tonalpohualli, or the Count of Days. This 260-day sacred calendar was composed of 20-day signs, and the very first of these signs was Cipactli. A day under this sign was considered one of potent, foundational energy, a time of beginnings that carried both the creative potential and the chaotic risk of the primordial beast. This calendrical association linked the birth of the world to the rhythm of human life, reminding people that every new cycle, whether a day, a year, or an era, required an acknowledgement of the sacrifice that made it possible. This concept reached its most profound and, to modern sensibilities, challenging expression in the Aztec practice of human sacrifice. From their perspective, this was not mere brutality. It was a sacred reciprocity. The gods had given their own blood and energy in the form of Cipactli's body to create and sustain the world, to keep the sun moving across the sky, to ensure the rains would fall and the world would not collapse back into chaos. Humanity had to reciprocate by offering the most precious substance they possessed, life force itself. The sacrifice was a way of feeding the cosmos, of replaying the primordial act of Cipactli's destruction to ensure continuous creation. The visual presence of Cipactli in Aztec art further cemented its role as a constant reminder of this cosmic interdependence. Though no massive statues survive, its image is carved into temple stones and painted in codices, often shown with its body segmented, representing the fractured landscape of the earth. It is a symbol of the foundation upon which everything rests, a foundation of struggle, transformation, and balance. This ancient worldview, which saw the earth not as a resource to be exploited but as a living body born from a sacred sacrifice, holds a startlingly relevant lesson for our time. In an era facing climate change and ecological crisis, the myth of Cipactli prefigures a deep ecological awareness. It illustrates the principle of interdependence, reminding us that we are not separate from the natural world, but are part of a living system that requires balance. The creature's story warns that taking from the world without giving back, without acknowledging the necessary cycles of death and rebirth, risks unraveling the very fabric of creation. Modern environmental movements, particularly those rooted in indigenous knowledge and the Gaia hypothesis, which sees the earth as a single living organism, echo this ancient wisdom. They call for a return to a perspective where we see ourselves as part of a sacred whole, with a responsibility to maintain the balance that Cipactli's sacrifice first made possible. So, how can such an ancient and violent myth of chaos possibly inform our response to today's complex global challenges? The story of Cipactli teaches us that order does not emerge from stillness, but from engaging with chaos. It suggests that facing immense, seemingly overwhelming problems, be it environmental collapse, social upheaval, or personal crisis, requires an acceptance of a difficult truth, that new growth often demands the end of an old way of being. The myth does not glorify destruction for its own sake, but frames it as a painful yet essential step in a continuous cycle of renewal. It urges us to find the courage to tear apart unsustainable systems and beliefs, just as the gods tore apart the primordial beast to build a new and more harmonious world from the pieces. This primordial narrative encourages resilience, not as a passive endurance, but as an active, creative force that recognizes destruction and creation as two sides of the same cosmic process, a lesson as vital now as it was in the highlands of ancient Mexico. From the foundational chaos of the Aztec cosmos, we now step into the quiet, moonlit landscapes of feudal Japan, where a different kind of haunting takes shape, one born not from primordial waters, but from profound human suffering. Imagine walking alone on a remote path late at night, when a sudden, intense ringing fills your ears, a sound that seems to come from inside your own head. This is the only warning before the Gashadokuro appears. It is not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a colossal skeleton, standing 15 times taller than a man, assembled from the bones of people who died of starvation and were left in unmarked graves, their spirits fusing together into a single, vengeful yokai. In the stillness, you would hear the horrifying clatter of its bones as it moves, its empty eye sockets fixed upon you, its only goal to seize you with its gigantic hands and bite off your head to drink your blood, attempting to quench a hunger that death itself could not extinguish. This terrifying figure is more than a simple monster. It is a skeletal harbinger of societal failure, a ghost made from the very consequences of neglect. The Gashadokuro's origins are firmly planted in the harsh soil of Japanese history, particularly the Edo period, which was marked by recurring famines that devastated rural communities. During events like the Great Tenmei Famine of the 1780s, widespread crop failure led to mass starvation. With no social safety net, the poor and the peasantry suffered immensely, and countless bodies were left abandoned in the fields or buried in mass graves without the proper funeral rites essential for a peaceful transition to the afterlife. According to Buddhist belief, when a person dies with such powerful, unresolved emotions, especially the agonizing pain of hunger and the bitterness of being forgotten, their spirit, or onryo, can remain trapped, unable to move on. The Gashadokuro is the ultimate expression of this belief. It is a collective onryo, a single entity forged from the rage and sorrow of hundreds of starved dead. Its immense size directly reflects the scale of the tragedy that created it. The folklorist Lafcadio Hearn, who dedicated his life to documenting the supernatural soul of Japan, wrote that the dead are not powerless. The Gashadokuro is the chilling proof of that statement. It is the power of the marginalized, the forgotten, and the wronged, returning from the shadows to demand that their suffering be acknowledged. It is a myth that gave a monstrous, unforgettable voice to those who had been silenced by history. This yokai served a crucial function as a stark moral lesson for the living. In a society with a rigid class structure and a strong emphasis on communal harmony, the Gashadokuro was a supernatural enforcement of social responsibility. The tales warned that such a creature would specifically target those who had been greedy, selfish, or wasteful during times of crisis: the merchant who hoarded rice to drive up prices, the samurai who taxed farmers into destitution, or the family that turned away a starving neighbor. Its eternal hunger for blood was a dark mirror of the hunger its constituent souls had endured, a perpetual reminder of the consequences of turning a blind eye to the suffering of one's community. This myth was not just a scary story. It was a powerful narrative tool that encouraged charity, warned against exploitation, and reinforced the idea that the well-being of the individual is inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole. It taught that societal neglect creates its own kind of poison, one that can coalesce into a physical threat that haunts everyone, regardless of their status. The cultural presence of the Gashadokuro extended deeply into Japanese art and religion. In the vibrant world of kabuki theater, actors would use elaborate costumes and stylized movements to bring the giant skeleton to life on stage, its appearance serving as a dramatic climax that often revealed the hidden sins of a corrupt lord or a greedy merchant, delivering a form of supernatural justice that resonated deeply with audiences. These performances were a communal processing of fear and anxiety, a way to confront the specter of famine and injustice in a controlled, symbolic space. The creature's connection to Buddhist beliefs is equally profound. The concept of gaki, or hungry ghosts, is a central part of Buddhist cosmology. Spirits condemned to an eternity of insatiable craving due to their attachments in life. The Gashadokuro can be seen as a monumental collective gaki, a walking embodiment of the spiritual consequences of unresolved desire and suffering. In rural villages, people developed practical rituals to ward off the creature. They would leave offerings of food and salt at crossroads or offer prayers at small, roadside shrines, not to worship the Gashadokuro, but to appease the tormented spirits that comprised it, hoping to ease their suffering and persuade them to remain at peace. This practice is hauntingly similar to modern memorials for victims of disasters or wars, where a community comes together to honor the dead and collectively process its trauma, ensuring that those who were lost are not forgotten. In contemporary Japan, the Gashadokuro has found a new lease on life, seamlessly transitioning from folktale to modern media. It appears frequently in anime, manga, and video games, often reinterpreted to critique current societal issues. In some stories, it might rise not from an ancient famine, but from the casualties of a corporate cover-up or a governmental failure, its giant skeleton a symbol of a system that has consumed its own people. These modern narratives use the yokai's classic form to comment on everything from economic inequality to the loneliness and social isolation of the modern world, proving that the fear of being neglected and forgotten is a timeless one. The Gashadokuro's journey from Edo period fields to digital screens forces us to confront a difficult but universal question. Why do societies so often create monsters from the raw material of their collective trauma? The answer lies in the fundamental need to make sense of the senseless. A famine is a complex tragedy of weather, economics, and policy. It is abstract and difficult to process. But a giant skeleton made of the victims, that is a villain. It gives a face and a form to the abstract forces of suffering. It transforms overwhelming grief and anger into a narrative that can be understood, a threat that can, in theory, be avoided through moral behavior and communal solidarity. The monster becomes a container for pain, a way for a culture to externalize its guilt, its fear, and its memory, ensuring that the lessons of a terrible history are passed down through generations, not as dry statistics, but as a story that rings in the ears and chills the bone. Leaving the skeletal horror of the Gashadokuro behind, we find ourselves drawn into the deep, whispering pine forests of Scandinavia, where the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the promise of enchantment. Here, the boundary between the familiar and the wild is as thin as a spider's silk, guarded by a being of captivating beauty and profound mystery, the Huldra. Imagine a woman of ethereal grace, her hair as dark as the forest soil and her voice a melody that seems to echo the very soul of the woods. She appears to a lone hunter or woodsman, a vision of perfection with one singular, startling flaw. When she turns, she reveals a hollow back like a rotted-out tree, or in some tales, the tail of a cow, a permanent mark of her otherworldly origin. She is the forest Enchantress, a being who perfectly embodies the intoxicating allure and the inherent danger of the untamed wild, a living reminder that nature's greatest gifts often come with a hidden cost. The Huldra's roots delve deep into the rich soil of Norse mythology and pre-Christian animism, a time when every stream, stone, and grove was believed to possess its own spirit. In texts like the Poetic Edda and the later folk tales compiled by collectors such as Peter Christen Asbjornsson and Georgian Moe, the forest was not an empty space but a populated, conscious realm. The Huldra, whose name simply means the Hidden One, was the queen of this domain. She was the specific spirit of a particular forest, a Vita, a being with whom one could interact, bargain, or offend. The renowned scholar of Norse myths, H.R. Ellis Davidson, powerfully linked beings like the Huldra to the concept of the otherworld, a parallel reality that existed just beyond the edge of human perception. It was in this liminal space that the Huldra truly blurred reality. She wasn't a mere ghost or a fairy. She was a tangible part of the ecosystem, a being who could cross over into the human world, often marrying a handsome farmer or a skilled hunter. These unions, however, were always conditional, built on a fragile trust. If her human husband respected the taboo of never looking at her back or mentioning her tail, the marriage could be long and prosperous, with the Huldra using her knowledge of the wild to bring good fortune to the farm. But the moment he betrayed that trust, either through cruelty or a careless word, the spell was broken. The Huldra would vanish instantly, returning to her forest, leaving behind only a memory and a lesson about the consequences of breaking a pact with the natural world. This dual nature is the very heart of the Huldra's character, casting her in two powerful, simultaneous roles, the seductress and the protector. As a seductress, she uses her mesmerizing beauty and song to lure men deeper into the woods, sometimes leading them astray for days or even making them disappear forever. This aspect represents the real, tangible dangers of the wilderness: getting lost, encountering predators, or succumbing to exposure. It was a narrative warning to be mindful and respectful when venturing into her domain. Yet the Huldra is equally a fierce protector of her realm. She possesses a strict moral code tied directly to the health of the forest. Those who showed respect, the hunter who only took what he needed, the woodcutter who asked permission before felling a tree, or the traveler who left a small offering of butter or bread might be rewarded. She could lead them to the best hunting grounds, protect their livestock from wolves, or ensure a bountiful harvest of berries and mushrooms. Conversely, those who harmed the forest wantonly, the logger who clear-cut a grove, the hunter who killed for sport, or anyone who polluted a spring would face her wrath. She could blight their crops, sour their milk, or lead them on a terrifying chase through the woods until they were hopelessly lost. This dynamic established an early, powerful form of conservation ethics, teaching that humanity's relationship with nature was one of reciprocity, not domination. The Huldra's legend was not monolithic. It shifted and evolved across the Scandinavian region, giving rise to fascinating variants. In Sweden, she was known as the Skogsra, or forest spirit, often depicted as a stunningly beautiful woman from the front, but with a back that was hollow like a dough trough or covered in bark. In some Norwegian tales, the Huldra could be part of an entire hidden people, the Hulderfolk, who lived in majestic underground kingdoms. Her influence permeated high culture as well, finding a place in the works of Norway's most celebrated playwright, Henrik Ibsen. In his seminal play Peer Gynt, the protagonist is tempted by the woman in green, a clear analogue to the Huldra, who offers him a life of sensual pleasure and power in her mountain kingdom if he will only sacrifice his human identity. This dramatic encounter serves as a powerful metaphor for the temptation to abandon the responsibilities of civilized life for the primal, amoral call of the wild, a central conflict of the human condition. This ancient myth continues to resonate with startling relevance in our modern world, particularly within eco-feminist literature and storytelling. The Huldra, as a powerful, feminine embodiment of nature, has been reinterpreted as a symbol of the damage caused by patriarchal systems that seek to control and exploit the environment. In contemporary fantasy novels and films, characters inspired by the Huldra often appear as guardians of ancient woodlands threatened by industrialization or corporate greed. Their stories are no longer just personal tragedies of betrayed love, but epic struggles that mirror our own global environmental crises. They warn us that the exploitation of nature is a form of betrayal, and that if we continue to look upon the back of the natural world, seeing it only as a resource to be mined and consumed, we risk the entire relationship collapsing, with the life-sustaining magic of the wild vanishing forever. The Huldra's enduring legacy forces us to ask what this forest enchantress can teach us about the fundamental nature of our relationship with the world around us. She reveals that this relationship has always been a complex dance of attraction and fear, of need and respect. She is the personification of the understanding that we are not separate from nature, but are in a constant, dynamic dialogue with it. Our survival and prosperity have always depended on our ability to honor that fragile bond, to listen for the song in the woods, and to remember that true wilderness demands not conquest but coexistence. Now we journey from the misty Scandinavian woods to the vibrant, sun-drenched landscapes of West Africa, where a creature of two faces embodies the terror of hidden evil. In the folklore of the Yu people of Ghana and Togo, the Adze presents a deceptively simple daytime disguise, a small, luminescent firefly, indistinguishable from any other. But as darkness falls, this seemingly harmless insect undergoes a terrifying transformation, shedding its insectoid form to become a human being by night. In this guise, it slips into homes to suck the blood of its victims, not only draining their vitality, but also spreading sickness and disease throughout the community. This dual existence makes the Adze a potent symbol of hidden dangers and social fears, a predator that walks undetected among its prey, its true nature masked by an ordinary, even beautiful exterior. The origins of the Adze are deeply rooted in ancestral beliefs that sought to explain the unexplainable, particularly the sudden and random onset of epidemics. Before the advent of modern germ theory, the cause of widespread illness was a profound mystery. The Adze myth provided a tangible framework for this chaos, attributing suffering not to an invisible pathogen, but to the malicious, conscious action of a supernatural being. It was a form of witchcraft, a force wielded by individuals with malevolent intent. Ethnographers like R.S. Rattray, who documented West African spiritual practices in the early 20th century, recorded the intricate rituals used by shamans and diviners to detect and combat the Adze. These rituals were a complex blend of spiritual warfare and community medicine, involving the use of special herbs, protective charms, and ceremonial interrogations designed to identify the human host of the Adze spirit. The anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard, in his seminal studies of witchcraft, observed that such beliefs explain unfortunate events, giving people a sense of agency and understanding in the face of arbitrary tragedy. By personifying disease as the Adze, communities could move from passive victims to active defenders, mobilizing their spiritual and social resources to fight back against a defined enemy. This framework, however, came with a heavy social cost, deeply influencing community dynamics in ways that mirror our own modern struggles with stigma and blame. An accusation of being an Adze was not just a supernatural allegation, it was a sentence of social death. The accused individual, often an outsider, a social rival, or someone who simply behaved differently, would be ostracized, driven from the village, or in some historical cases, subjected to violent punishment. This process reveals a painful but universal human tendency, the need for a scapegoat. When a community is gripped by the terror of a plague it cannot control, that collective fear and anger must be directed somewhere. The Adze provided a perfect vessel. It transformed the abstract, terrifying randomness of an epidemic into a concrete villain that could be named, accused, and expelled. In doing so, it offered a grim form of closure and a restored, if fragile, sense of order, purging the community of both the perceived source of the evil and the underlying social tensions that may have fueled the accusation in the first place. The Adze is a fascinating entry in the global tapestry of vampire myths, sharing core traits with creatures like the European vampire or the Assassinbonsum, another fearsome being from Akan folklore. Common threads include the parasitic consumption of life force, a shape-shifting nature, and an association with nocturnal predation. Yet, the Adze is uniquely African in its specific symbolism and its integration into local systems of justice and social control. In some traditional contexts, the process of identifying an Adze host functioned as an informal judicial system, a way to resolve disputes, redistribute wealth, or punish anti-social behavior under the guise of supernatural intervention. This demonstrates how folklore can be woven into the very mechanisms that maintain social order, providing a culturally understood language for enacting justice, however flawed that process might seem to modern eyes. In a remarkable demonstration of folklore's adaptability, the ancient myth of the Adze is being revitalized for a profoundly modern purpose. Public health campaigns in West Africa, particularly those combating malaria, have cleverly co-opted the creature's symbolism. Malaria, transmitted by mosquitoes under the cover of night and causing debilitating fever, shares striking parallels with the Adze modus operandi. Health workers have reframed the Adze not as a witch, but as a metaphor for the malaria parasite itself. In educational comics, radio dramas, and community outreach programs, the message is clear. The real Adze is not a neighbor with a grudge, but the mosquito that bites you after dark. This ingenious pivot uses a deeply ingrained cultural fear to promote practical, life-saving behaviors like sleeping under insecticide-treated bed nets, eliminating standing water, and seeking prompt medical treatment. By harnessing the power of a fear-based myth, these campaigns transform a source of superstition and social division into a unifying tool for prevention and collective wellness. This creative repurposing of the Adze invites a broader reflection on the potential of our oldest stories. It challenges us to look beyond the surface-level fear and see the adaptive power inherent in folklore. These narratives are not static relics. They are living, breathing tools that our ancestors used to navigate a frightening world. The question is not whether we should discard them, but how we can, like those modern health workers, harness their deep cultural resonance for positive change. Can the ghost stories that taught us to avoid dangerous places now teach us about urban safety? Could the tales of greedy dragons be reinterpreted to critique corporate excess? The story of the Adze shows us that the most potent myths are those that can evolve, shedding their harmful aspects while retaining their power to captivate and educate, guiding us to confront the real rather than the imagined monsters in our midst. From the intimate, earthbound fears of witchcraft, we now ascend into the boundless sky to meet a being whose very presence commands the heavens. Across the vast tapestry of Native American traditions, from the forest-dwelling Algonquian peoples to the horse cultures of the Great Plains, the thunderbird soars as the ultimate sky sovereign. Envision a raptor of impossible scale, its wingspan blotting out the sun, each beat of its powerful wings generating the rolling booms of thunder, while the flash of its piercing eyes casts brilliant forks of lightning across the stormy sky. This was no mere animal, but a divine embodiment of nature's raw, untamable power, a celestial force that governed the weather and, by extension, the very fate of the communities below. In the oral histories of the Lakota, this relationship was defined by a sacred, perpetual struggle. The Thunderbird served as a mighty protector, engaged in an eternal battle with the Untehai, monstrous water serpents and spirits that dwelled in rivers and lakes. This cosmic conflict between the sky and water realms was essential for maintaining the world's balance. The Thunderbird's victories ensured that the serpents did not flood the land or overwhelm humanity, symbolizing the necessary tension between opposing elements that sustains all life. This profound connection between the mythical and the meteorological was deeply intertwined with a spiritual reverence for the natural world. The words of Chief Luther Standing Bear of the Oglala Lakota resonate deeply here, as he reflected that the old people came literally to love the soil. This love was an active relational bond, and the Thunderbird was a key part of that relationship. It was not a distant, indifferent god, but a powerful neighbor and ally. Its arrival in the spring with life-giving rains was a cause for gratitude, a sign that the earth would be nourished and the crops would grow. Yet, its potential for destructive fury in a violent storm was a sobering reminder of the respect this power demanded. This duality fostered a worldview of interconnectedness, where humanity was not separate from nature, but a humble participant in a much larger, sacred conversation. The Thunderbird was the most powerful voice in that conversation, teaching that survival depended on understanding and honoring the forces of the world, not attempting to conquer them. The cultural significance of the Thunderbird was expressed in every facet of life, from governance to art. Its image was a potent symbol of authority, and tribal leaders would often invoke its name or emblem to signify their role as protectors and providers for their people. The creature also served as an ancient form of weather prediction. Observant elders and spiritual leaders would study the patterns of storms, interpreting the Thunderbird's behavior to forecast seasonal changes, predict the success of a hunt, or warn of coming hardships. This knowledge was crucial for survival and governance, directly influencing decisions about when to move camp, when to plant, and how to allocate resources. This practical wisdom, channeled through the myth, fostered a system of environmental stewardship that was both spiritual and pragmatic. The people understood that the land, the water, and the sky were not commodities but relatives, and the Thunderbird was the most powerful relative of all, demanding a relationship built on respect and reciprocity. This reverence was immortalized in some of the most iconic artistic expressions of indigenous culture. Along the Pacific Northwest coast, master carvers would meticulously shape the Thunderbird into towering totem poles. Its formidable features, a massive, curved beak and outstretched wings often positioned at the very top, signifying its supreme status in the spiritual hierarchy. These poles were not mere decorations. They were heraldic crests, storytelling devices, and assertions of clan identity, all rooted in the power of the Thunderbird. In the Central Plains, the creature's role was central to ceremonies like the Sun Dance, a profound ritual of renewal, sacrifice, and prayer. While the sun was a central figure, the Thunderbird was invoked as a bringer of rain and a purifier. Its symbolic power called upon to cleanse the community and ensure the continued harmony of the natural world. The percussive rhythms of drums and the collective energy of the dancers were believed to echo the Thunderbird's own mighty presence, forging a tangible connection between the people and the forces of the sky. The immense symbolic power of the Thunderbird was so compelling that it transcended its indigenous origins to be adopted into the very fabric of modern American identity, though not always with the same spiritual context. A striking example is its adoption by the United States Air Force, which named its elite aerial demonstration squadron the Thunderbirds. For the Air Force, the name evokes attributes of speed, precision, and overwhelming air power, channeling the creature's legendary dominance of the sky. This appropriation, while a testament to the myth's enduring resonance, stands in stark contrast to the original ethos of the Thunderbird, where the indigenous view sees a sacred being that teaches respect for natural power. The military use symbolizes humanity's technological mastery over the skies. This contrast highlights the vastly different ways a single mythical idea can be interpreted and applied across cultures. Today, the Thunderbird is experiencing a powerful resurgence as a symbol of resilience and advocacy within contemporary indigenous activism. As climate change intensifies, bringing with it more frequent and severe storms, droughts, and environmental disruptions, the ancient lessons of the Thunderbird have never been more relevant. Indigenous leaders and communities are revitalizing the symbol, using its image in protests, art, and educational campaigns that advocate for climate justice and environmental protection. The Thunderbird reminds us that the storms we now face are not merely scientific phenomena, but the consequences of a broken relationship with the natural world. It calls for a return to a worldview of balance and respect, linking ancestral wisdom directly to the most pressing crisis of our time. The creature's enduring legacy challenges us to move beyond seeing nature as a resource to be managed and instead to recognize it as a powerful, living entity to which we are intrinsically connected. It teaches that true respect for natural power is not found in fear or domination, but in the humility to listen, the wisdom to learn, and the courage to fight for the balance that sustains us all. As the echoes of the Thunderbird storms fade, we find ourselves in a world of a different kind of chill, the deep, snow-blanketed winter of the alpine regions, where the festive cheer of Christmas has a distinctly sharp-toothed shadow. Here, the Krampus, a horned, cloven-hoofed demon wielding a bundle of birch branches and shaking rusty chains, stalks the night. He is the dark counterpart to the benevolent Saint Nicholas, the ancient enforcer who punishes naughty children while the saint rewards the good. This is not a simple monster story. It is a profound seasonal drama that pits light against dark, reward against punishment, embodying a deep-seated understanding that joy and fear are two sides of the same winter coin. The Krampus is a figure born from the very landscape he inhabits, a personification of the harsh, unforgiving alpine winter and the moral retribution required to survive it as a community. His origins reach back far before the spread of Christianity, into the murky pre-Germanic pagan traditions that saw the winter solstice as a time of potent spiritual danger. In these ancient beliefs, the darkest days of the year were when the boundaries between the human world and the spirit world grew thin, allowing all manner of wild, chaotic forces to roam freely. The Krampus is a direct descendant of these spirits, closely linked to the Wild Hunt, a phantom, spectral procession through the winter sky led by a fearsome god or spirit. His specific form was solidified in the traditional Pachtenlof festivals, named for the Pachten, which were both beautiful and ugly spirits that roamed during the 12 nights of Christmas. These festivals involved villagers dressing in terrifying wooden masks and shaggy costumes, their loud processions and raucous behavior designed to drive away the ghosts of winter and frighten the sun into returning. The Krampus, as we know him, is one of these Pachten, a figure of controlled chaos whose ritualized terror served a vital, purifying purpose for the entire village. This ritual provided a powerful, communal outlet for what the folklorist Gerald Brommer identified as the shadow self. He argued that the Krampus allows a community to reclaim and confront its darker impulses through a channel of ritualized fear. In a society with strict social codes and religious morals, the Winter Festival was a sanctioned time to give those repressed energies a voice and a form. The men who donned the Krampus masks and costumes were not just performing, they were temporarily embodying the wildness, the anger, and the mischief that civilized life demanded they suppress the rest of the year. For the onlookers, especially children, the terrifying encounter with the Krampus was a visceral lesson in consequences, a folkloric justice system that made abstract rules of behavior terrifyingly concrete. This annual confrontation with a punishing figure allowed the community to collectively acknowledge and then expel its own inner darkness, emerging into the new year feeling psychologically cleansed and morally reaffirmed. The visual culture of the Krampus is as striking as the folklore itself, particularly in the bizarre and darkly humorous world of Krampusgarten Krampus postcards. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, these cards were wildly popular in Austria and Germany, often sent as festive greetings with a wicked twist. They depicted scenes of sheer pandemonium, Krampus figures dragging screaming children away in baskets, swatting terrified citizens with their birch rods, or leering menacingly from the edges of a peaceful Christmas scene. Some cards were even more confronting, showing the demon enjoying a cigarette or a drink after a hard night's work of scaring the populace. These postcards were more than just festive novelty. They were a form of popular art that both celebrated and commodified the creature's terrifying appeal, broadcasting his image far beyond the remote mountain villages and planting the seed for his future global fame. They presented a version of the holidays that was anything but sanitized, a reminder that the season contained room for mischief, satire, and a healthy dose of fear. This widespread popularity, however, did not go unchallenged. The very nature of the Krampus, with his blatantly pagan and demonic features, put him on a collision course with Christian authorities for centuries. The Catholic Church repeatedly tried to suppress the Krampus traditions, viewing the wild, unruly celebrations as a dangerous and blasphemous holdover from a pagan past. In the 17th century, church leaders across Bavaria and Austria outright banned the Krampus runs, threatening participants with excommunication. Clergy preached sermons condemning the figure as a devilish corruption of a holy season. Despite these efforts, the tradition proved incredibly resilient, particularly in rural communities where the old ways held fast. The people simply refused to give up their dark companion of Saint Nicholas, demonstrating the deep psychological and cultural need the Krampus fulfilled. He could not be exorcised by decree because he was not truly an external demon, but an internal one, a necessary part of the community's emotional and moral landscape. In our modern era, the Krampus has undergone a spectacular revival, transforming from a regional folk figure into a global pop culture icon. This resurgence is deeply tied to a growing sense of fatigue with the hyper-commercialized, relentlessly cheerful version of Christmas that dominates much of the world. The Krampus has become a symbol of rebellion against the endless consumerism and the pressure to project perfect holiday happiness. He appears in major Hollywood films, graphic novels, and television shows, often portrayed as an anti-hero who brutally cuts through the tinsel and sentimentality to deliver a more authentic, if more frightening, seasonal experience. This modern Krampus is a critic, his fearsome visage a protest against the loss of the holiday's original, complex texture, a texture that included not just light, but also the acknowledging shadow of darkness, consequence, and the raw power of nature. To truly understand his enduring power, one must witness a traditional Krampuslauf or Krampus run in an Austrian or Bavarian village today. As night falls and the air turns bitingly cold, the streets fill with the sound of heavy bells and the clatter of chains. Dozens of performers, adorned in intricately carved wooden masks and full body suits of shaggy fur, surge through the crowd. They are not merely parading, they are actively performing, chasing spectators, playfully swatting them with their birch rods, and creating a controlled, cathartic chaos. The atmosphere is electric, a mixture of genuine fear and exhilaration. For the participants, putting on the mask is a transformative act, a release from their everyday identities. For the crowd, being chased is a thrilling surrender to a primal fear, a collective shiver that is immediately followed by relieved laughter. This function is remarkably similar to the role of Halloween in other cultures, where donning a scary costume or visiting a haunted house allows people to play with fear in a safe, socially sanctioned environment. It is a ritual that proves we sometimes need to be a little scared to truly feel alive, and that joy can feel infinitely brighter when it is wrested from the jaws of a well-understood darkness. This brings us to that central, haunting question: why do we, as humans, consistently feel the need to invite frightening figures into our most cherished celebrations? The Krampus provides a compelling answer. He represents the profound psychological need for balance. A celebration that is only about unadulterated joy and light can feel shallow, even oppressive. It denies the full spectrum of human experience, the presence of a figure like the Krampus introduces a necessary contrast. He makes the kindness of Saint Nicholas feel more meaningful and the safety of the warm hearth more precious. He validates our own hidden frustrations and darker moods during a time when we are told we must be only happy. By giving that darkness a name, a face, and a ritualized role, we rob it of its power to haunt us unconsciously. We acknowledge the shadow, we dance with it in the snowy streets, and in doing so, we achieve a more complete, more resilient, and ultimately more human kind of joy. After the raw, elemental terror of the Krampus, we travel to the sun-scorched deserts of the ancient world, where a different kind of horror took shape, one born not from winter's chill, but from the fear of the utterly alien. Imagine a creature stalking the remote frontiers of the Persian Empire, a beast with the powerful, tawny body of a lion, a tail that arches up to deliver a lethal strike of venomous scorpion spines, and most unnervingly, the face of a bearded man, complete with a chilling, intelligent gaze and 3 rows of razor-sharp teeth. This is the manticore whose very name, derived from the old Persian martia kvara, translates bluntly to man-eater. It was said to use a seductive, melodic voice to lure unsuspecting travelers deep into the wilderness before pouncing with unstoppable force, its human-like features making its predatory nature all the more terrifying. This was not a monster of simple savagery, but a hybrid horror that represented the ultimate perversion of the familiar, a symbol of the profound dangers believed to lurk in the uncharted territories beyond the civilized world. The earliest accounts of the manticore come to us through a fascinating chain of cultural transmission, a classic example of how myth travels and transforms. The Greek historian Ctesias, who served as a physician in the Persian court of Artaxerxes II in the 5th century before the Common Era, is credited with first documenting the creature for a Western audience in his work Indica. Ctesias, who likely heard these tales from Persian and Indian sources, described the manticoras as a very real animal from India, blending local lore with his own interpretations. His account was then picked up and popularized by later Roman writers, most notably the encyclopedist Pliny the Elder in his Naturalis Historia. Pliny, who wrote of the marvels beyond belief found in distant lands, presented the manticore alongside more factual animals, his authoritative tone blurring the line between zoology and fantasy. This process demonstrates how the manticore was not born from pure imagination, but was a cultural product of imperial expansion. As Greek and Roman empires pushed their boundaries eastward, they encountered stories of strange beasts and foreign peoples, and the manticore became a powerful embodiment of the anxieties these encounters produced: the fear of the unknown landscape, the perceived savagery of its inhabitants, and the lurking threat of being consumed, both literally and culturally, by the exotic other. Throughout the medieval period, the manticore found a secure home in the illuminated pages of bestiaries, those beautifully illustrated volumes that used the animal kingdom to impart moral and theological lessons. In these Christian contexts, the creature's symbolism evolved. Its human face and deceptive voice made it a perfect allegory for the devil himself, a being who could disguise his evil nature with a facade of reason and eloquence to lure the faithful into sin. Its lion's body represented pride, its scorpion tail the deadly sting of a sinful act. The manticore taught a clear lesson: evil could be charismatic and intelligent, and one must be constantly vigilant against the seductive traps set by the enemy of mankind. This allegorical role cemented its place in the medieval imagination, but it also had a surprising impact on early science. For centuries, naturalists and explorers, guided by the accounts of Pliny and the bestiaries, included the manticore in their classifications of the natural world. It was listed alongside lions and tigers as a genuine, if rare, species, a testament to how myth could stubbornly persist within the framework of emerging scientific thought. shaping the very categories used to understand life on Earth. Beyond the pages of books, the manticore's formidable image was co-opted as a symbol of power and protection. In the world of European heraldry, its hybrid form appeared on coats of arms and family crests. Here, its meaning was inverted from a symbol of terror to one of fierce guardianship. A knight or noble family that bore the manticore on their shield was communicating a clear message. They possessed the lion's courage, the strategic cunning of a human mind, and the lethal, unstoppable strike of the scorpion. They were a force to be reckoned with, capable of defending their domain from any threat. This heraldic use shows the remarkable flexibility of mythical symbols, how a creature born from fear of the foreign could be domesticated into an emblem of local identity and martial pride. From a psychological perspective, the manticore can be interpreted as a manifestation of our most primal fears, specifically the terror of predation and the uncanny valley. The deep unease we feel when confronted with something that is almost human but not quite. Its human face makes its animalistic hunger feel like a personal, intelligent malice, a violation of the natural order that is far more disturbing than a purely bestial monster. In our modern era, the manticore has been fully resurrected within the realms of fantasy literature, role-playing games, and film. In these new stories, it is often more than a simple monster to be slain. It has become a complex metaphor for exploring themes of identity, hybridity, and the monstrous within. In series like Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson or countless video games, encountering a manticore represents a challenge that tests a hero's wit as much as their strength, forcing them to see beyond a deceptive exterior. The creature's blended nature resonates powerfully in a globalized world where questions of cultural fusion, genetic engineering, and personal identity are constantly debated. Its image has even been adopted by the world of commerce. Several technology companies and investment firms use the name manticore to brand themselves, implying they possess a fierce, innovative, and multifaceted approach to their industry, capable of striking with precision in a competitive landscape. This journey from Persian desert to corporate logo is a stunning demonstration of a myth's ability to adapt and find relevance across millennia. The enduring story of the manticore ultimately forces us to confront a crucial question about the nature of storytelling itself. How does a creature like this reflect the complex dynamics of cultural encounters and the misunderstandings that inevitably arise from them? The manticore is a product of the space between cultures. It was born when Greek rationality attempted to categorize and explain Persian and Indian folklore, resulting in a hybrid that was neither fully Eastern nor Western. It embodies the human tendency to project our own fears and anxieties onto the unknown, to transform foreign peoples and landscapes into monstrous caricatures. The manticore is, in a very real sense, a myth of xenophobia, a warning that when we venture into new cultural territories, we risk creating monsters out of mere difference. Its legacy teaches us that the stories we tell about the other are rarely just stories. They are powerful forces that shape perceptions, justify prejudices, and can either bridge divides or deepen them, a lesson as vital in the age of the internet as it was in the age of camel caravans. From the horned demon of the alpine winter, we are drawn to the deep, silent waters of the Slavic world, where a different kind of spirit waits beneath the surface. The Rusalka is not a single, easily defined creature, but a tragic and complex figure, a water-bound ghost whose very existence is a testament to unresolved grief and the sharp sting of betrayal. She is most often the soul of a young woman who met a terrible, untimely end by drowning, whether by suicide after a devastating heartbreak, by murder at the hands of a lover, or simply by a cruel accident. During the week of the Green Holidays, or Rusalnaya week in early summer, a time when the boundary between the human and spirit worlds was believed to be thin, she was said to rise from her river or lake. She would sit on the banks combing her long, flowing hair with a pale hand, or swing from the branches of birch trees, her ethereal song a siren call to the men who passed by. Those who were lured by her beauty and her mournful melody would find themselves pulled into a deadly embrace, dragged down into the depths to share her watery grave. In this, the Rusalka embodies a profound duality. She is both a victim of tragedy and an agent of vengeance, a symbol of the natural world's fertility and its chilling, unforgiving power. Her origins flow from the deep well of pre-Christian Slavic animism, a time when every element of the natural world was seen as possessing its own spirit. Initially, these spirits, known as Vila or Barajinya, were not inherently malevolent. They were guardians of fields, forests, and waters who could bless the land with fertility or withdraw their favor if disrespected. The Rusalka evolved from these nature spirits, her character transforming under the weight of specific, heartbreaking circumstances. Her vengeful nature was almost always a direct result of a profound social or personal injustice. A peasant girl seduced and abandoned by a nobleman, a young wife murdered by a jealous husband, or a bride who drowned herself to escape a forced marriage. These were the souls that became Rusalki. Their rage was not random evil, but a focused, supernatural retribution for the wrongs they suffered in life, often specifically targeting the kind of men who had wronged them. The great Russian writer and folklorist Alexander Afanasiev, who dedicated his life to collecting these tales, noted that such myths express the soul of the people. The stories of the Rusalki were a way for communities, particularly peasant communities with little formal power, to process collective trauma. They gave a voice and a form to the very real dangers young women faced, the social injustices that led to their suffering, and the all-too-common tragedy of accidental drownings in a landscape crisscrossed by powerful rivers. This inherent duality made the relationship with the Rusalka one of cautious respect, navigated through a series of intricate folk rituals. During Rusalnaya week, villagers would engage in ceremonies designed either to welcome the Rusalki as bringers of spring rain and crop growth or to ward off their more dangerous aspects. In some regions, girls would dress as Rusalki, weaving flower crowns and performing circular dances, a ritual meant to honor the spirits and encourage their benevolent side. In others, the focus was on appeasement and protection. People would avoid swimming or even doing laundry in rivers, fearing to disturb the spirits. They would leave small offerings on the riverbank, cloths, ribbons, or pieces of bread, to pacify the Rusalki and ensure the safety of their families and livestock. To prevent a recently deceased young woman from becoming a Rusalka, specific funeral rites were meticulously observed. Her body might be pierced with a needle or her coffin bound with ropes, all in an effort to pin her soul to the ground and prevent it from wandering back to the water. These practices show a deep, practical engagement with the myth, treating the Rusalka not as a simple monster from a story, but as a real and potent force that required careful management in daily life. The Rusalka's powerful narrative soon flowed from folk tradition into the heart of Russian high culture, where she became a timeless symbol of tragic love and doomed femininity. The most famous literary depiction comes from Alexander Pushkin's epic poem Ruslan and Ludmilla. In it, a whole realm of Rusalki is described, both alluring and terrifying, their song a weapon that can enchant and destroy. But it is in other works, like the operas that followed, that her tragedy is fully explored. In Antonin Dvorok's opera Rusalka, the water nymph falls in love with a human prince, a desire that leads her to make a Faustian bargain with a witch. She gains legs but loses her voice, and ultimately her love ends in betrayal and heartbreak, condemning her to become a death-bearing spirit. This narrative powerfully captures the core of the myth, the impossible longing for a different life, the high cost of transformation, and the eternal sorrow that results from a love that crosses the boundaries of different worlds. In these artistic interpretations, the Rusalka is forever trapped between two states, neither fully human nor fully spirit, neither wholly innocent nor wholly monstrous, a poignant representation of the female experience constrained by societal expectations and the consequences of desire. When we place the Rusalka alongside other water spirits from global folklore, her unique character comes into sharper focus. While she shares the siren-like qualities of the Greek sirens or the Germanic Lorelei, who also use song to lure sailors to their doom, her origins are fundamentally different. The sirens are often depicted as primordial monsters, part of the natural world's inherent danger. The Rusalka, however, is almost always a created monster, her malevolence forged in the crucible of human cruelty. She has more in common with the Asian ghost stories of the Pontianak or the La Llorona of Latin American folklore, women who died in connection with childbirth or their children and return as vengeful spirits. This global pattern suggests a deep, cross-cultural need to mythologize the specific vulnerabilities and traumas associated with women, giving a collective voice to fears about female sexuality, betrayal, and the violence they could suffer. In more recent years, this has led to a wave of feminist reinterpretations of the Rusalka. Scholars and writers now often see her not as a simple villain, but as a powerful symbol of female agency and rage in a patriarchal world. Her violence is reinterpreted as the righteous fury of the silenced and wronged, a supernatural rebellion against the social structures that led to her death. She becomes an avenging angel for the oppressed, a terrifying but understandable embodiment of the phrase, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." The practical impact of the Rusalka myth extended right down to the water's edge, influencing the daily lives of those who lived and worked on Russia's vast network of rivers. Fishing communities and ferrymen shared stories of Rusalki that were specific to certain dangerous bends in the river or deep, dark pools. These narratives functioned as an early, powerful form of public safety campaign. A tale about a Rusalka who drowned a fisherman at a particular spot was far more effective at keeping children and inexperienced swimmers away from a treacherous undercurrent than a simple warning. The community's ceremonial practices during Rusalnaya week, which involved blessing the waters and making offerings, served a dual purpose. They were acts of spiritual appeasement, but they were also communal reaffirmations of the dangers of the river, a way to collectively acknowledge and respect the power of nature. This use of narrative as a tool for safety finds a direct parallel in modern public safety campaigns that use dramatic, emotional stories to warn about the dangers of drunk driving, swimming in unauthorized areas, or texting while driving. Both the ancient myth and the modern ad campaign understand that a compelling, emotionally resonant story is often far more persuasive and memorable than a list of dry facts and statistics. So, what does the enduring, sorrowful figure of the Rusalka ultimately reveal about how cultures process the profound and often senseless experience of loss? She shows us that myth provides a vital container for grief, particularly for grief that is sudden, violent, or unjust. A drowning is a random, chaotic, and horrifying event. By transforming the victim into a Rusalka, the community gives that tragedy a story, a reason, and a continued presence in the world. The spirit is not gone. She has been transformed, and her new role, however frightening, gives a structure to the community's mourning and fear. She becomes a focus for the complex emotions surrounding death: the anger, the guilt, the longing, and the fear. The rituals surrounding her allow people to actively engage with those feelings, to offer apologies, to show respect, and to seek a measure of control over the unpredictable forces of life and death. The Rusalka is a myth of healing because she allows a community to externalize its collective pain, to give it a name and a face, and through story and ritual, to learn to live alongside it, a haunting but integral part of the cultural and natural landscape. High in the thin, crisp air of the Himalayas, where the sky meets the snow-capped peaks in a world of stark beauty and profound silence, there walks a giant. Known to the Sherpa and the people of Bhutan as the Migoi, this towering, ape-like being is far more than a simple mountain monster. It is the revered guardian of the high places, a spiritual symbol of the wilderness's untouchable purity. While the Western world might know a similar figure as the Yeti or the abominable snowman, the Migoi is deeply woven into the fabric of local belief, a creature whose existence blurs the line between spiritual allegory and tantalizing physical possibility. Its massive, mysterious footprints pressed into the snow have ignited a century of debate between cryptozoologists hoping to prove its biological reality and anthropologists seeking to understand its profound cultural meaning. This creature stands at the crossroads, a being of myth that challenges our very definitions of reality and invites us to consider what might still remain undiscovered in the planet's most remote corners. The origins of the Migoi are not found in sensationalized expedition reports, but in the ancient spiritual traditions of the Himalayas. Its roots extend deep into both the pre-Buddhist Bonpo faith and Tibetan Buddhism, where it is often regarded not as a monster, but as a reclusive, powerful being with a connection to the sacred landscape. In ancient religious manuscripts like the Kangya, a collection of Buddha's teachings, there are references to powerful, wild beings that inhabit the wilderness, entities that possess great strength and are best left undisturbed. Within this spiritual context, the Migoi is seen as a symbol of the mountain's untainted essence. It is an integral part of a cosmology that views the entire natural world as alive with consciousness and spiritual energy. To encounter a Migoi is not necessarily a threat, but a significant spiritual event, a moment of contact with the raw, divine power of the mountains themselves. This perspective transforms the Migoi from a mere animal into a sacred signpost, a reminder that some parts of the world should remain wild and revered, not conquered and catalogued. This spiritual reverence translates directly into a powerful system of environmental ethics for the communities who call these mountains home. For the Sherpa and other Himalayan peoples, the Migoi is a central figure in a complex web of taboos designed to protect the fragile ecosystem. Certain high valleys and dense forests are considered the specific territory of the Migoi, and entering these areas for hunting or logging is strictly forbidden. This is not just a rule, it is a deeply held belief that violating this taboo will bring bad luck, illness, or the direct wrath of the giant itself. This folkloric prohibition functions as a highly effective form of traditional conservation law. By instilling a sense of sacred fear and respect, the myth of the Migoi has for generations protected vulnerable habitats from overexploitation. It preserves the sanctity of water sources, allows wildlife populations to thrive undisturbed, and maintains the ecological balance of the high alpine regions. The creature is, in effect, the original park ranger, its legendary presence enforcing a code of conduct that has ensured the sustainability of life in one of the world's most challenging environments. The renowned mountaineer Reinhold Messner, who spent years searching for the Yeti after a chilling, personal encounter in the darkness, eventually came to a fascinating conclusion. He stated that the Yeti is a legend that points to real animals. Messner's theory, now widely supported by scientific inquiry, suggests that the legend of the Migoi is based on real, albeit rare and elusive, creatures. The most likely candidate is the Tibetan blue bear, a subspecies of the brown bear that is exceptionally large, rarely seen, and often walks on its hind legs, leaving footprints that could easily be misinterpreted as belonging to a giant ape. Another compelling possibility lies in the realm of paleontology. Gigantopithecus, a massive, extinct ape that stood over 3 meters tall and roamed Asia millions of years ago, has long been proposed as a potential source for the Yeti myth. While no Gigantopithecus fossils have been found in the Himalayas, the ancestral memory of such a colossal primate, passed down through generations in oral tradition, could have evolved into the legend of the Migoi. This doesn't diminish the myth, it enriches it, showing how human observation and storytelling can transform a rare biological reality into a powerful cultural and spiritual symbol. The Migoi's influence is beautifully captured in the region's unique art, particularly in the intricate and vibrant Thangka paintings. These are not mere decorations but sacred objects used for meditation and teaching. In some Thangkas, especially those depicting the rich biodiversity and spiritual geography of the Himalayas, the Migoi is sometimes included among the other realm's inhabitants. It is portrayed as a large, hairy being, often shown in a posture that suggests strength and solitude rather than aggression. Its inclusion in such religious art elevates it from a folk tale to a recognized part of the spiritual ecosystem, a being that holds a specific, acknowledged place in the cosmic order. This artistic representation reinforces its role as a guardian, a tangible manifestation of the power and mystery that the mountains represent in the Himalayan worldview. In our modern era, the legend of the Migoi has taken on a new and critically important life, directly influencing conservation policy and ecotourism. The Kingdom of Bhutan, a nation that famously prioritizes gross national happiness over gross domestic product, has woven this myth directly into its environmental stewardship. The government has officially designated certain forested regions as protected Migoi habitats. This is a brilliant synthesis of ancient belief and modern science. By using the culturally powerful figure of the Migoi to justify the creation of wildlife corridors and national parks, Bhutan has found a way to make conservation immediately understandable and deeply resonant for its citizens. This approach bridges the gap between indigenous knowledge and scientific inquiry, demonstrating that the two are not in opposition but can work in concert. The myth provides the cultural motivation and emotional connection, while biological science provides the data and management strategies. This partnership has helped preserve Bhutan's incredible biodiversity, protecting not only the possible real animals behind the myth, but countless other species that share its mountain home. This leads us to a question with profound implications for our global environmental challenges. How can legendary creatures, so often dismissed as fantasy, become powerful allies in real-world conservation? The Migoi provides a compelling answer. It demonstrates that a myth, when rooted in a culture's relationship with its environment, can be a more potent conservation tool than any government regulation. A law can be broken, but a deeply held story, one that is tied to identity, spirituality, and a sense of place, is far more resilient. It inspires protection from the inside out, fostering a sense of personal and communal responsibility for the land. The Migoi is not just a story about a monster, it is a narrative device that encodes generations of ecological wisdom. It teaches respect for the unknown, cautions against arrogance, and reminds us that we share this planet with other forms of life, both seen and unseen. In an age of rampant habitat destruction and species extinction, perhaps we need more such myth stories that remind us of the magic and mystery of the wild, and of our sacred duty to protect it for the giants, both real and imagined, that may still call it home. From the high, windswept cliffs of the North Atlantic, a haunting melody seems to drift on the salt-laden air, a call that speaks of a world both familiar and profoundly alien. This is the realm of the Selkie, a being of heartbreaking duality, forever caught between the deep, dark freedom of the ocean and the warm, confining hearth of the land. In the folklore of Irish, Scottish, and especially Orcadian coastal villages, the Selkie is a seal in the sea, but possesses a magical pelt that allows it to shed its animal skin and step onto the shore as a human of stunning beauty. These are not shape-shifters by choice in the way of trickster gods. Their transformation is a fundamental part of their nature, a temporary shedding of one identity to experience another. The tragedy and the core of their myth arises when a human intervenes, discovering and stealing the hidden sealskin. Without it, the Selkie is trapped, unable to return to the sea, forced into a life on land, often as the spouse of the very person who captured them. These forced marriages are characterized by a deep, lingering sorrow. The Selkie wife or husband may be a good parent and a dutiful partner, but their gaze is always turned toward the ocean, their heart aching for the waves. They live a life of quiet captivity, a poignant symbol of a spirit confined, performing the role of a human while their true self yearns for the wild. This profound myth emerged directly from the daily lives of the maritime communities that told these stories. For generations, fishermen and their families lived in intimate proximity with seals, observing behaviors that felt unnervingly human. Seals have large, liquid brown eyes that seem to hold a deep, knowing intelligence, and they are often seen in groups, basking on rocks in a way that resembles a community gathering. They vocalize with sounds that can eerily mimic human cries or singing. It was a natural, almost inevitable, leap of the imagination for these communities to believe that seals were not just animals, but a parallel people, the Selkie folk, who were their kin from the sea. This belief is powerfully preserved in collections like Alexander Carmichael's Carmina Gaedlica, a vast repository of Hebridean prayers, hymns, and folklore, where the boundary between the natural and supernatural is thin as sea mist. The poet W.B. Yeats perfectly captured this ethereal quality when he wrote of the Celtic twilight, a liminal space where the material world and the spirit world overlap. In this twilight, the Selkie exists, a being that literally blurs the lines between worlds, representing a universal longing for belonging and the often devastating cost of assimilation into a culture not one's own. The classic Selkie narrative is one of love, but it is a love built on theft and possession, leading inexorably to loss. The most common tale tells of a lonely fisherman who, hiding among the rocks, witnesses a group of seals shed their skins and dance on the beach as beautiful men and women. Enraptured by one in particular, he steals her sealskin while she is distracted. When the others return to the sea, she is left behind, unable to follow. The fisherman takes her home, hides the skin, and she becomes his wife. For years, they may have children and build a life together. She is often a wonderful mother, her children inheriting a slight webbing between their fingers or toes, a permanent mark of their hybrid nature. But the moment she discovers her hidden skin, often told by one of her own curious children, who finds the strange pelt in a chest or under the floorboards, her true nature calls her back irresistibly. She takes the skin, returns to the ocean, and often, though she may watch her human family from a distance, she never comes back to land. This story is not a condemnation of the Selkie, but of the human act of theft. It explores the painful tension between domesticity and wildness, asking whether a being of such profound freedom can ever be truly happy in a cage, no matter how gilded. The legend of the Selkie is not a monolith. It shifts and changes as you travel across the North Atlantic archipelago. In the Orkney Islands, the stories are particularly rich and often focus on the male Selkie, who is said to come ashore to seduce lonely human women whose husbands are away at sea. These encounters, while sometimes portrayed as romantic, are also tinged with melancholy, as the Selkie lover must always return to his oceanic home. In Icelandic folklore, a similar being exists called the Hafstramba or seaman, who also marries a human woman after she steals his sealskin. The narrative beats are remarkably consistent, revealing a shared maritime consciousness that understood the sea as both a provider and a rival, a place of mystery that could give and take away the people one loved. This regional variation shows how the core themes of the myth, longing, loss, and the conflict between two worlds resonated deeply across different cultures bound by the sea. In our modern era, the Selkie has found powerful new life as a potent symbol for feminist narratives about bodily autonomy and agency. Contemporary retellings often reframe the story, focusing on the Selkie's perspective. Her stolen skin is not just a magical object, it is her freedom, her identity, and her consent. The human who steals it is not a romantic hero, but a captor, and her eventual recovery of the skin is a triumphant act of reclaiming her own body and destiny. This interpretation transforms the ancient folktale into a powerful allegory for female liberation from oppressive relationships or societal expectations. The myth speaks to the experience of feeling trapped in a life or identity that is not one's own, and the profound, sometimes painful, journey required to reclaim one's true self. It validates the choice to leave a situation that is stifling, even if it means leaving behind people one cares for, framing it not as abandonment, but as a necessary return to one's core being. This modern resonance is beautifully illustrated in films like Tom Moore's Academy Award-nominated Song of the Sea. The animated masterpiece weaves the Selkie myth into a story about a young girl named Saoirse who discovers she is the last of the Selkies. The film uses the myth not just as a fantasy element, but as a profound metaphor for cultural memory, diaspora, and the suppression of emotion and folklore in the modern world. Saoirse's mother, a Selkie, is forced to return to the sea, and Saoirse's own journey to embrace her heritage becomes a quest to save the spirit world from being forgotten. The film powerfully connects the Selkie's loss of her voice or her skin to the way modern society can cause us to lose touch with our own stories, our grief, and our magical inner lives. It shows how these ancient tales are not relics, but living frameworks that can help us navigate contemporary struggles with identity, mental health, and the search for belonging in a fragmented world. Beyond grand themes of identity and freedom, the Selkie also played a practical, folkloric role in the daily lives of sailors. In many fishing villages, seals and by extension Selkies were seen as omens. A seal swimming near a boat could be a good sign, a guide to a plentiful fishing ground, or it could be a dire warning of an approaching storm. Some believed that the Selkies deliberately caused storms to wreck ships and claim the drowned sailors as their own husbands or wives. This belief system created a relationship of respect and caution. Sailors would heed the behavior of seals just as a modern forecaster would read a barometer, seeing in their movements the intentions of the capricious sea. This ancient practice of observing nature for signs of safety finds a direct parallel in our own time, where sailors and coastal communities rely on sophisticated weather models and storm warnings. The underlying principle is the same, a deep respect for the power of the natural world and an understanding that survival depends on learning to read its signs. So, what does this enduring, sorrowful myth of the seal folk ultimately reveal about the human condition? The Selkie story is a profound exploration of our own deep-seated desire for transformation and the inherent tension that comes with it. We all carry within us multiple selves, the self that belongs to family and society, and the wild, untamed self that yearns for absolute freedom. The Selkie's trapped existence on land mirrors our own feelings of being caught in roles and responsibilities that sometimes chafe against our core identity. Her triumphant, if tragic, return to the sea represents our own longing to shed the skins we wear for the world and reconnect with our most authentic nature. The myth asks us difficult questions about the choices we make. Is the comfort and safety of the domestic world worth the sacrifice of our wilder spirit? Can we ever truly possess another being, or does such an act only lead to mutual sorrow? the Selkie offers no easy answers, only the haunting reminder that within every human heart there is a longing for another world, a call from the deep that, if we are brave enough to listen, might just guide us back to our true selves. After the Selkie's poignant journey between sea and shore, we now turn to a companion whose loyalty transcends the ultimate boundary, the one between life and death. In the rich spiritual landscape of the Aztec world, the Xoloitzcuintli was far more than a pet. It was a sacred guide, a four-legged psychopomp whose duty was to lead the souls of the deceased through the treacherous, nine-layered underworld of Mictlan. Imagine this hairless dog with its warm, smooth skin and alert, bat-like ears, standing as a silent sentinel at the edge of mortality. Its very existence was a gift from the gods, specifically from Xolotl, the deity of lightning, fire, and bad luck, who was also the twin of Quetzalcoatl and the lord of the evening star. The myth tells that Xolotl created the Xoloitzcuintli from a sliver of the bone world, the primordial realm from which the current age of humanity was born. This divine origin imbued the creature with a sacred purpose, making it a living bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Ancient codices, like the famed Codex Borgia, depict this faithful companion alongside the souls of the departed, illustrating its crucial role on the arduous journey through darkness, cold, and confronting winds that the spirit had to endure before reaching its final rest. This profound role was not merely symbolic, it was woven directly into the fabric of Aztec funerary rites, revealing a sophisticated and practical understanding of death as a transition, not an end. For a soul to successfully navigate the challenges of Mictlan, it needed a guide, and the Xoloitzcuintli was uniquely qualified for this sacred task. Archaeologist Manuel Aguilar Morno profoundly observed that dogs were bridges between worlds, and this concept was acted upon with solemn ritual. When a person died, a Xolo dog was often ceremonially killed and buried or cremated alongside its owner. A small clay figure of the dog might be placed in the grave, or a thread might be tied from the corpse to the animal's neck, a physical tether to ensure the guide would not lose its charge in the vastness of the underworld. This practice underscores a deep, empathetic worldview. The Aztecs did not see death as a solitary journey into nothingness, but as a perilous voyage that required a loyal and familiar companion. The dog's known traits, its loyalty, its protective nature, and its exceptional sense of direction, were seen as the ideal qualities for a spiritual navigator. This was a profound expression of love and duty, ensuring that even in the face of the great unknown, no one had to walk alone. Beyond its role as a psychopomp, the Xoloitzcuintli held another, more earthly power, deeply connected to its unique physicality. Its hairless body, often warm to the touch due to its direct exposure to the air, was believed to possess therapeutic properties. People suffering from ailments like arthritis, rheumatism, or insomnia would sleep with these dogs, using them as living, breathing heating pads. The warmth radiating from their skin was thought to soothe pain, ease inflammation, and bring comfort. This belief in the Xolo's healing power created a beautiful symmetry in its cultural role. It was a creature that cared for the body in life and guided the soul in death, a holistic guardian for the entire human experience. This wasn't mere superstition. It was an early form of therapeutic practice, recognizing the tangible comfort that the presence of a devoted animal can provide. This dual identity as both healer and guide made the Xoloitzcuintli an indispensable part of the household, a cherished being that mediated between physical wellness and spiritual peace. For centuries after the Spanish conquest, the Xoloitzcuintli's sacred status faded, and the breed nearly vanished, surviving mostly in remote rural villages. Its dramatic revival in the 20th century is inextricably linked to the Mexican cultural renaissance, and most famously to the artist Frida Kahlo. Kahlo, whose work was deeply preoccupied with pain, identity, and Mexican indigeneity, frequently featured her own Zoloid dogs in her paintings. In self-portraits, they appear nestled in her arms or seated loyally by her side, their hairless forms echoing her own struggles with a broken body. Through her art, Kahlo reintroduced the Zolo to the world, not as a relic, but as a vibrant symbol of Mexican resilience, endurance, and the unbroken thread connecting the modern nation to its pre-Hispanic soul. She transformed the Zolo from an archaeological curiosity into a national treasure, a living emblem of a culture that refuses to forget its roots. Today, the breed is celebrated and protected, a point of immense national pride and a direct physical link to the ancient myths that once shaped an entire civilization. This living myth finds its most powerful modern expression during the Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. In homes and on elaborately constructed altars known as ofrendas, it is common to see small, handcrafted figures of the Zoloids currently placed among the marigolds, photographs, and favorite foods of the departed. These clay or sugar statuettes are not simple decorations. They are active participants in the ritual. They are placed there with intention, a silent prayer that the ancestral companion is once again performing its age-old duty, guiding the spirits of loved ones as they return for their annual visit, and more importantly, ensuring they find their way back safely to Qilin when the celebration is over. This practice demonstrates the incredible adaptability and enduring power of myth. An ancient funerary practice has been transformed into a vibrant, communal celebration that honors death as a natural part of life. The Zolo's presence on the altar bridges millennia, connecting contemporary families with the beliefs of their ancestors in a continuous, unbroken cycle of remembrance and love. So, how can such an ancient myth, centered so explicitly on death, offer us comfort in our modern, often death-averse society? The story of the Zoloids currently provides a profound antidote to the loneliness and fear that can surround the end of life. In a world where death is often medicalized, hidden away, and spoken of in hushed tones, the Aztec myth presents a different model, one of companionship, purpose, and continuity. It reassures us that we are not abandoned at the moment of our greatest transition. The loyal, warm presence of the Zoloids currently reframes death not as a cold, clinical event, but as a journey for which we are prepared and accompanied. It speaks to a universal human desire to not be alone in the dark, and to believe that a faithful friend, one who knew us in life, will be there to lead us gently into whatever comes next. This enduring symbol offers solace by reminding us that the bonds of loyalty and love are so powerful, so fundamental, that not even death is thought to be able to break them. While the Zoloids currently guided souls with gentle loyalty, our next creature presents a far more perilous encounter, one where a single glance can bring a swift and permanent end. In the sweltering marshes along the Nile, ancient Greek and Roman writers described a beast of such profound lethargy and lethal power that to look upon it was to invite instant petrification. The catapulpas, a name meaning "that which looks downward," was depicted as a creature resembling a buffalo or a wild boar, but with a head so impossibly heavy that it perpetually dragged along the ground, unable to lift its devastating gaze. This was not a creature that hunted with speed or ferocity, but one that existed as a passive, almost tragic hazard. Its very posture suggested a burden of immense weight, a being crushed by the gravity of its own deadly nature, and its myth became a powerful symbol for the hidden dangers of forbidden knowledge and the fatal consequences of unchecked curiosity. Our most detailed early account of this bizarre being comes from the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder in his sprawling encyclopedia, Natural History. Pliny located the catapulpas in the region of Ethiopia, near the source of the Nile, describing it as a beast of medium size, sluggish in its movements, and with a head that was always bent downward toward the earth. He reported that its gaze was so venomous that any living creature that met its eyes would drop dead on the spot. This description, like many in Pliny's work, was likely a case of myth-making born from a kernel of truth. Travelers and merchants returning from the fringes of the empire would have brought tales of the strange wildlife they encountered, and the peculiar behavior of real animals was often amplified into the supernatural. The most plausible candidates for the inspiration of the catapulpas are the gonu, or wildebeest, a creature known for its low-hanging head and seemingly sullen demeanor as it grazes, or the hippopotamus, a massive, river-dwelling giant that could indeed seem like a monstrous buffalo to an unacquainted observer. The myth, therefore, served as an early attempt to rationalize and categorize the unfamiliar, transforming the strange fauna of a distant continent into a cautionary tale for the civilized world. This idea of a deadly gaze connects the catapulpas to a deeper philosophical concern that troubled the greatest minds of antiquity. The philosopher Aristotle himself pondered the very limits of perception, questioning how we can trust our senses to deliver a true understanding of the world. The catapulpas became a perfect mythological embodiment of this problem. It presented a terrifying paradox: the human drive to see, to explore, and to know could itself be the instrument of one's destruction. To satisfy your curiosity about this strange, drooping-headed beast was to risk your life. The creature taught that some things are not meant to be seen, that some knowledge comes at too high a price. This lesson was eagerly adopted and expanded upon by medieval Christian scribes and artists who compiled bestiaries. In these illustrated moral guides, the natural world was a book written by God, and every creature held a divine lesson. The catapulpas was reinterpreted as a potent metaphor for sin, specifically the sin of pride. Its downward gaze was said to represent those who are so weighed down by worldly concerns and sinful desires that they cannot lift their eyes to heaven. Its lethal glance was the spiritual death that pride inflicts upon the soul, turning a person's heart to stone against God's grace. This symbolic weight ensured the catapulpas a place not only in manuscripts but in the very stone of medieval churches. Its fearsome visage, often blended with features of other deadly creatures, was carved into gargoyles and misericords. Perched high on cathedrals, these stone representations served a dual purpose. They were architectural drain spouts, but they were also silent sermons in stone, reminding the faithful of the ever-present dangers of sin and the importance of spiritual vigilance. The creature's mythos became intertwined with that of another legendary beast with a deadly gaze, the basilisk or cockatrice. While the basilisk was often portrayed as a more aggressive, serpent-like king of reptiles, the catapulpas was its sluggish, bovine counterpart. Both shared the power to kill with a look, but the catapulpas's passive, almost reluctant danger made it in some ways more insidious. It represented a threat that was not sought out but merely stumbled upon, a danger inherent in the landscape itself, waiting for the unwary. The reign of the catapulpas as a plausible, if terrifying, denizen of the natural world began to wane with the dawn of the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment. As naturalists like Konrad Gessner began to apply more rigorous methods of observation and classification, the legendary beast was systematically debunked. Explorers and scientists, armed with a growing understanding of global fauna, correctly identified the wildebeest and the hippopotamus, explaining their behavior without the need for supernatural petrification. The catapulpas was gently moved from the ledger of zoology to the shelf of mythology, a curious relic of a time when the map of the world was still filled with monsters. Yet, as with so many of these forgotten creatures, it refused to disappear entirely. The catapulpas found a vibrant new life in the 20th and 21st centuries within the boundless realms of fantasy literature and role-playing games. In these modern mythologies, from the pages of fantasy novels to games like Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy, the catapulpas is resurrected as a classic high-level monster. It is a challenge for heroes to overcome, often guarding treasure or a crucial path, its petrifying gaze serving as an ultimate test of a party's strategy and courage. This transition from a feared reality to a coveted fictional challenge shows how our relationship with these myths has evolved. We now actively seek out the danger they represent, turning ancient terrors into structured adventures. Beyond the realm of fantasy gaming, the Catapulpas holds a powerful and surprisingly relevant psychological resonance. In a modern context, its petrifying gaze can be interpreted as a metaphor for the paralyzing effects of anxiety and depression. The creature's heavy, downward-dragging head perfectly mirrors the physical and emotional weight experienced by someone in the grip of a deep depressive episode, the feeling of being so burdened that you cannot lift your eyes to meet the world. Its lethal gaze, which turns living beings to stone, is a stark analogy for how severe anxiety can freeze a person in their tracks, immobilizing them with fear and preventing action. The myth captures the essence of a condition that makes its sufferer feel both like a victim and an inadvertent source of danger, potentially pushing others away. This ancient fear of a gaze that halts life finds a poignant echo in the modern understanding of mental health struggles, where the act of simply facing the day can feel like a monumental task against an invisible, petrifying force. This brings us to a fundamental question that the Catapulpas forces us to confront. Why have humans across so many different cultures repeatedly imagined beings whose primary power is a punishing, destructive gaze? The answer seems to lie in our deep-seated intuition about the power of sight itself. Seeing is our primary way of understanding the world, and it is intimately linked to knowing. A visual taboo, therefore, is one of the most profound taboos possible. Stories of the Catapulpas, the basilisk, or the Gorgon Medusa all revolve around the idea that some knowledge is too terrible to behold, that some truths can shatter the observer. These myths codify the understanding that curiosity, while a driving force of progress, has its limits. They warn that to look upon something taboo, whether it is the naked face of a god, a sacred object, or the full horror of death, is to risk being utterly undone by the experience. The Catapulpas, in its sluggish, earth-bound misery, teaches that the desire to see everything can sometimes cost us our very ability to move, to live, and to act, forever frozen by what we have witnessed. Now, we voyage across the vast Pacific to the lands of Aotearoa, New Zealand, where the very rivers and forests are believed to pulse with the presence of a powerful and ancient guardian. The Taniwha is far more than a simple monster. It is a foundational being in Maori mythology, a creature of profound duality that can be both a fierce protector of a tribe, an iwi, or a terrifying menace to those who disrespect its domain. Imagine a great serpentine dragon dwelling in a deep, dark river pool, or a scaled reptilian beast watching from a dense, ancient forest. Its form is as fluid as its role, sometimes described as a shark, a giant lizard, or a log that suddenly comes to life, and it is often a powerful shape-shifter. This incredible being is not a mere legend from a storybook. It is the living spiritual essence of the land and water itself, a physical manifestation of the mana, or spiritual power, of a place and its people. To understand the Taniwha is to understand the Maori worldview, where the natural environment is not a resource to be owned, but a relative to be respected, a relationship that has been carefully mapped out through story for generations. The origins of the Taniwha flow from the deep wells of Polynesian oral tradition, carried to Aotearoa by the great voyaging canoes that first settled the islands. Because these stories were passed down through specific iwi, the nature of the Taniwha varies dramatically from region to region, each one a unique character in the local landscape. In some traditions, a Taniwha might be the guardian spirit of a founding ancestor, a being who guided the canoe to a safe landing and then remained to watch over the descendants. In others, it could be a malevolent force, a monster that demands tribute and drowns the unwary. Many tales describe the Taniwha as a tester of heroes, a shape-shifting challenge that a young chief must outwit or befriend to prove his worth and secure his leadership. These rich and varied narratives were meticulously recorded by early ethnographers like John White in his monumental work, The Ancient History of the Maori, preserving a cosmology where every significant geographical feature could have a spiritual resident. The renowned anthropologist Dame Joan Metch profoundly captured the function of these stories when she stated that myths are maps of meaning. The Taniwha was not just a fantastical tale, it was a practical, spiritual, and ethical guide. Its presence in a river taught where it was safe to fish and where the currents were dangerously strong. Its association with a forest grove dictated where one could build and where one must not disturb, creating a detailed system of environmental ethics and resource management long before the concept of conservation existed. This deep, ingrained respect was formalized through the concept of tapu, a state of sacredness that implies both restriction and power. The Taniwha was a primary enforcer of tapu. A river where a Taniwha lived was tapu. Its waters were not to be polluted, and fishing might be restricted to certain seasons or methods to avoid offending the guardian. A forest inhabited by a Taniwha was tapu. Cutting down certain trees or hunting there without the proper rituals could bring calamity upon the entire community. This was not superstition, but a sophisticated cultural mechanism for ensuring sustainability. The Taniwha myth also served as a powerful tool for conflict resolution and historical record. Tribal boundaries were often defined by the territory of their protective Taniwha. Disputes over land or fishing rights could be settled by reciting the ancestral stories that connected one's people to the Taniwha of that place, blending myth with historical events to establish ownership and authority in a way that was recognized and respected by all. The cultural importance of the Taniwha is permanently etched into the very heart of Maori society. The Waranui, or meeting house, the carved wooden posts or pu that support these structures often feature stunning, stylized representations of the tribal Taniwha. These carvings are not merely decorative, they are the physical embodiment of the tribe's guardian, a constant, watchful presence during meetings, ceremonies, and times of decision. To sit beneath the gaze of the carved Taniwha is to be reminded of your responsibilities to the tribe, to your ancestors, and to the land that the Taniwha protects. This tangible representation keeps the myth alive and immediate, ensuring that each new generation understands the sacred connection between their people and their environment. In the modern era, this connection has taken on a new and powerful legal dimension. During the process of settling historical grievances with the New Zealand government, Maori iwi have repeatedly presented the stories of their Taniwha as evidence of their deep, long-standing relationship with specific lands and rivers. In this context, the myth becomes a legal and moral testament, a way to prove ancestral ownership and spiritual stewardship in a contemporary courtroom, demonstrating the enduring power of oral tradition. Perhaps the most striking example of the Taniwha's relevance in the 21st century occurred with the planned construction of the Waikato Expressway, a major highway north of Auckland. The local iwi, Ngoti Naho, opposed a section of the route because it would pass through an area they believed was the home of a revered Taniwha named Karutahi. They argued that the earthworks would desecrate its dwelling, destroy its resting place, and bring bad luck to all who used the road. This was not a frivolous objection. It was a serious cultural and spiritual concern. The claim sparked a nationwide debate, forcing a conversation about the place of indigenous belief in a modern, secular society. After significant discussion and redesign, the New Zealand Transport Agency agreed to alter the path of the highway, creating a small bend to avoid the Taniwha's domain, and even installing a culturally significant stone to mark and appease the spirit. This compromise was a landmark moment, proving that a centuries-old myth could directly influence multi-million-dollar infrastructure policy, and that a nation was willing to listen to the wisdom encoded in its oldest stories. The story of the Taniwha and the highway offers a profound answer to a question we must all consider. How can indigenous myths like this one actively inform our global sustainability efforts? The Taniwha represents a worldview that does not see nature as a separate, inanimate resource, but as a living, conscious community to which humans belong. This perspective fosters a relationship of reciprocity and deep respect, rather than one of exploitation. In a world grappling with climate change, pollution, and habitat loss, the lesson of the Taniwha is that environmental protection is not just a scientific or political issue, but a spiritual and ethical one. It suggests that if we could learn to see a forest as a sacred guardian rather than a timber supply, or a river as a living ancestor rather than an industrial water source, our approach to conservation would be fundamentally transformed. The Taniwha teaches that sustainability is not about managing resources, but about honoring relationships, a wisdom from ancestral stories that holds a key to navigating our planetary future. Deep within the ancient, whispering woods of Slavic lands, where sunlight filters through a dense canopy in dappled shafts, the very trees themselves seem to watch you. This is the domain of the Leshy, the ultimate wilderness master. More than just a spirit, the Leshy is the conscious soul of the forest given form, a towering, shape-shifting guardian whose moods are as changeable as the weather. He can stand as high as the tallest pine, his beard made of living vines and his eyes glowing like marsh lights, or he can shrink down to the size of a blade of grass, disappearing completely into the undergrowth. His voice is a symphony of the wild, capable of mimicking the calls of birds, the howl of the wind, and even the voices of your own loved ones to lure you deeper into his labyrinth of trees. To encounter the Leshy is to come face to face with the untamable, mysterious heart of the wild itself, a force that demands respect rather than conquest. The roots of this formidable being dig deep into the rich soil of pre-Christian Slavic animism, a world view where every element of the natural world, every stream, stone, and grove, was believed to possess its own spirit. In this cosmology, the forest was not an empty space to be claimed, but a populated, conscious community. The Leshy was the specific master, or Koziane, of his particular woodland, a sovereign of his green realm. The great ethnographer Alexander Afanasiev, who compiled countless folk tales in the 19th century, documented the intricate rules of engagement with this forest lord. A person venturing into the woods was expected to behave as a guest in someone else's home. It was customary to leave a small offering, a piece of bread, a pancake, or a handful of grain, at the base of a particularly old tree, a gesture of respect to ensure safe passage and a successful hunt. In return, a pleased Leshy might guide a lost traveler back to the path, protect livestock from wolves, or lead a respectful hunter to a bountiful catch. This relationship was a practical, daily manifestation of a sacred pact between humanity and the wilderness, a constant reminder that human survival was deeply dependent on the goodwill of the natural world. This delicate balance was enforced through the Leshy's famous tricks, which were less about malice and more about teaching a lesson. His primary power was to disorient those who entered his domain with arrogance or harm. A boastful woodcutter who bragged about how much timber he would fell might find himself walking in circles for hours, the familiar path suddenly unrecognizable. A hunter who killed for sport rather than necessity could be led astray by the sound of laughter and footsteps just beyond the next tree, only to emerge from the forest hours later, empty-handed and miles from home. The forest itself would seem to shift and change under the Leshy's influence, with landmarks moving and the sun appearing in the wrong part of the sky. The brilliant writer Nikolai Gogol, who wove these folk beliefs into his stories, perfectly captured their essence when he noted that beings like the Leshy reflect the soul of the land. These tricks were a supernatural enforcement of ecological ethics. They punished greed, rewarded humility, and taught that the forest was a place to be navigated with care and reverence, not dominated with brute force. It was a system of natural law administered by a spirit. The Leshy's presence was deeply woven into the fabric of peasant life, and his behavior was believed to be intrinsically tied to the turning of the seasons. He was not a static being, but one who lived and breathed with the rhythm of the forest. In the spring, he was full of youthful energy, playing tricks and mating with other forest spirits. As summer reached its peak, he was a mature and powerful guardian. But with the arrival of autumn, his mood would darken. As the leaves began to fall, the Leshy was said to grow restless and irritable, knowing his time of dominance was waning. When the first heavy snows arrived, he was believed to descend beneath the earth, hibernating until the spring thaw returned life to the woods. This connection to the annual cycle made the Leshy a vital character in seasonal rituals. His influence extended from the practical world of the peasant into the highest realms of Russian culture, finding a celebrated place in the opera The Snow Maiden by Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. In this magical work, the Leshy is a named character who emerges from the forest with a retinue of other mythical beings, his deep, earthy presence providing a stark and powerful contrast to the more ethereal spirits of the story, grounding the fantasy in the raw power of the natural world. In a remarkable demonstration of a myth's enduring power, the Leshy is experiencing a vibrant revival in our modern era, this time as a potent symbol for the ecotourism and environmental movements. Across Russia and Eastern Europe, national parks and nature reserves have begun to consciously adopt the image of the Leshy in their educational materials and guided tours. His formidable visage appears on trail signs and informational brochures, not as a monster to be feared, but as a friendly, if stern, mascot for the wilderness. The message is clear: you are now entering the Leshy's domain. Please behave respectfully. This clever use of folklore does more than just add local color. It taps into a deep cultural memory that encourages specific protective behaviors. Littering isn't just against the rules, it's an insult to the master of the forest. Straying from marked trails isn't just risky, it's an invitation to be led astray. This modern application transforms an ancient fear into a contemporary conservation ethic, proving that a good story can be more effective than a list of regulations. This educational use of the myth has a long tradition. For generations, parents in rural Russian villages have told Leshy tales to their children not merely to frighten them, but to instill a foundational love and respect for nature. A story about a boy who got lost after tearing the wings off a butterfly was a far more memorable and impactful lesson about the consequences of cruelty than a simple scolding. These narratives functioned as an early and deeply effective form of environmental education, shaping a child's perception of the forest as a living, feeling entity long before they ever encountered the scientific concepts of ecosystems and biodiversity. The Leshy taught that the woods were alive, that they had rules, and that our survival within them depended on understanding and honoring those rules. This profound, animistic worldview, which sees the wild not as a collection of resources but as a community of conscious beings, offers a crucial perspective as we face a global ecological crisis. The Leshy challenges our modern, often disconnected relationship with nature. He embodies a time when humanity saw itself as part of a conversation with the wild, a dialogue that required listening as much as taking. His legacy asks us to reconsider our role not as masters of the natural world, but as humble guests within it, learning once again how to coexist with the untamable wild spaces that sustain us all. Deep within the impenetrable, mist-shrouded swamps of the Congo Basin, a legend persists with the tenacity of the ancient vines that choke the jungle, a legend of a creature of impossible scale, a relic from a world long since past. The Mokele-Mbembe, a name from the Lingala language often translated as one who stops the flow of rivers, is described as a beast of monumental proportions with a long, serpentine neck, a massive, heavy body, and the general likeness of a sauropod dinosaur, a living, breathing memory of the Jurassic era surviving in the planet's last great wilderness. This is not a story born from modern fantasy, but from the deep, oral traditions of the Aka and other indigenous tribes who have lived in harmony with the treacherous Likuala swamps for centuries. In their accounts, the Mokele-Mbembe is not a mythic god, but a tangible, if elusive, part of the local fauna, a fiercely territorial herbivore that feeds on the malombo plants and is known to attack hippos that venture too close to its domain. For generations, these stories have served as a powerful explanation for the unexplained: the sudden, violent churning of a calm river, the crashing of trees where no human or known animal treads, the deep, bellowing calls that echo through the primal forest. These narratives provided a framework for understanding the mysteries of an ecosystem so vast and complex that it continually defies full comprehension. The journey of the Mokele-Mbembe from local folklore to an international cryptozoological sensation is a fascinating tale of cultural collision and the enduring human desire for discovery. The first written accounts came from European missionaries and colonial explorers in the early 20th century, who, upon hearing these vivid descriptions from local guides, were quick to interpret them through the lens of their own burgeoning understanding of paleontology. The image of a long-necked, swamp-dwelling giant immediately conjured visions of dinosaurs, a group of animals that had only recently captured the public imagination. This interpretation transformed the creature from a regional spirit of the river into a potential living fossil, a survivor from the Age of Giants. The esteemed biologist and explorer Roy P. Mackall, who led 2 dedicated expeditions in the 1980s, perfectly encapsulated this allure when he stated that the Mokele-Mbembe represents the unknown. His quest, and those of many others, were not mere monster hunts. They were driven by a profound scientific and philosophical curiosity about the possibility of lost worlds and the tantalizing chance that our planet might still hold secrets of this magnitude, hidden away in a green fortress largely untouched by time. These expeditions into the heart of the Congo are epic sagas in their own right, blending high-stakes adventure with serious anthropology. Teams of researchers, armed with advanced listening devices, satellite imagery, and cameras, have ventured into one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth, facing tropical diseases, daunting terrain, and political instability. Yet the true heart of these quests lies not in the technology, but in the collaboration with the local communities. The stories of the Mokele-Mbembe are not found in books, but are carried in the memories of elders and hunters. Expeditions rely on these individuals as guides and interpreters, creating a unique intersection where cutting-edge science meets ancient oral tradition. While no definitive physical evidence, a clear photograph, a bone, a carcass has ever been produced, these journeys have yielded something equally valuable: a rich ethnographic record of the beliefs and worldviews of the people who call this labyrinthine wilderness home. The search for the creature becomes a study in how myth functions within a culture, serving as a guardian narrative for the ecosystem itself. The Mokele-Mbembe's legendary presence enforces a form of respect for the swamps. Its supposed territory becomes a place of caution, indirectly protecting those areas from overhunting or encroachment, a cultural taboo that functions as informal conservation law. This cultural significance extends far beyond the village and the expedition camp, spilling over into global media and popular culture. the Mokele-Mbembe has become a star of documentaries, a fixture in books on unexplained phenomena, and an inspiration for countless works of fiction, from pulp adventure novels to animated films. In these stories, the creature often symbolizes the last vestige of a wild, untamed world, a final challenge for an increasingly mapped and explored planet. It represents the ultimate what-if, pushing at the very boundaries of established knowledge. The scientific community remains, understandably, deeply skeptical, citing the immense ecological pressures and the sheer biological improbability of a small, relict population of large dinosaurs surviving for 66 million years without leaving a clear fossil record in the region. Yet, the myth persists with undeniable force, fueled by the simple, powerful fact that the Congo Basin is so vast and so poorly explored that absolute certainty feels, to many, like arrogance. This ongoing debate between mainstream science and cryptozoology raises profound questions about the limits of discovery and the nature of evidence itself, challenging us to consider where healthy skepticism ends and closed-mindedness begins. Perhaps the most impactful and least expected role of the Mokele-Mbembe legend is its power as a tool for real-world conservation. The creature's celebrity has cast an international spotlight on the Congo Basin, one of the most critical and threatened biodiversity hotspots on Earth. Environmental organizations and conservationists have cleverly leveraged the public's fascination with the living dinosaur to draw attention to the very real but less sensational ecological treasures of the region. The quest to find a single mythical beast inadvertently highlights the plight of the forest elephants, lowland gorillas, and countless other species that are facing extinction due to deforestation, poaching, and resource extraction. The legend acts as a powerful gateway, pulling people into a narrative that ultimately leads them to care about the preservation of the entire ecosystem. In this sense, the Mokele-Mbembe is a potent guardian of the swamp, not through physical might, but through the power of story, using its mythical allure to fight for the survival of its very real home. This brings us to a deeply philosophical question that the Mokele-Mbembe forces us to confront. How does a persistent legend like this challenge our fundamental understanding of extinction? On one level, the creature represents a direct challenge to the scientific consensus, a narrative that suggests the history of life on Earth may be more fluid and less completely known than our textbooks claim. It embodies the hope that the final chapter on some species has not yet been written, that the world may still hold miraculous survivors. On a more profound level, the myth challenges the cultural and emotional finality of extinction. The idea that a creature from the age of dinosaurs might still walk the earth keeps that lost world alive in our collective imagination. It blurs the hard line we draw between the deep past and the present, suggesting that the echoes of prehistory might not be confined to bones in a museum, but could still resonate in the rustling of leaves in a remote jungle. The Mokele-Mbembe, whether it exists in flesh and blood or solely in the realm of story, is a testament to the power of the human imagination to resist closure, to continually probe the shadows of the unknown, and to find in those shadows not just fear, but a sense of boundless, wondrous possibility. This relentless curiosity, this refusal to accept that all the great discoveries have been made, is the very engine that has driven scientific inquiry for centuries, proving that sometimes the most valuable treasure a legend offers is not the truth it may hide, but the inspiration it provides to keep looking. Before we meet the gentle guardian of the Philippine forests, we must first bear witness to the ultimate Genesis story, a creation born not from a word or a thought, but from a cosmic act of violence against a dragon of unimaginable scale. In the swirling, formless void that existed before time, there was only Tiamat, the primordial saltwater serpent dragon of Babylonian myth. She was not merely a monster, she was chaos itself, the personification of the boundless, undifferentiated ocean, mingling her waters with those of her consort, Apsu, the sweet waters, to give birth to the first generations of gods. This peaceful, generative state could not last. The young gods, full of energy and noise, disturbed the quiet of the primordial parents, leading Apsu to plot their destruction. Enraged, the goddess slew Apsu, establishing his own dwelling upon the sweet waters. This act set the stage for the ultimate confrontation, a battle that would define the very structure of the cosmos, as told in the epic Enuma Elish. Grieving and furious at the death of her mate, Tiamat, who had once been a creative, maternal force, transformed into a vengeful and destructive one. She created a horde of monstrous offspring, venomous serpents, raging lions, scorpion men, and the mighty mad dragon, and appointed her new consort, Kingu, as the general of her terrifying army. She gave him the Tablet of Destinies, which held the power to control the fates of all things. The younger gods were terrified, unable to stand against the mother of all, until the champion Marduk, the god of thunder and storm, stepped forward. He agreed to fight, but only if the gods would grant him supreme and unchallenged kingship should he prevail. Desperate, they agreed. The ensuing battle was the ultimate clash of order against chaos. Marduk, armed with his winds, a net, and his invincible weapon, the Imhalu, faced the colossal Tiamat. He rode his storm chariot into her open, roaring maw, and before she could devour him, he unleashed the winds to inflate her body, rendering her powerless. He then shot an arrow that split her heart, killing her. Standing triumphant over her vast, lifeless body, Marduk then performed the creative act that formed the world as we know it. He cleaved her carcass into two halves like a giant shellfish. One half he raised up to become the heavens, the other he pressed down to form the earth. From her weeping eyes he caused the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to flow. Her body became the foundation of the ordered universe, a physical reality built directly upon the remains of vanquished chaos. As the scholar Thorkild Jacobsen so eloquently put it, Tiamat is the mother of all. Her story is a profound exploration of cosmogony, explaining how a stable, predictable world can only emerge from the violent suppression of a primal, chaotic force. This myth was far more than a simple story for the people of Mesopotamia. It was a foundational narrative that justified the social and political order. Marduk's victory and subsequent crowning as the king of the gods directly mirrored and legitimized the absolute power of the Babylonian king on earth. The fear of Tiamat's return, the terror that the world could slide back into the formless, watery void, was a powerful cultural undercurrent. It explained the chaos of floods, invasions, and social upheaval, reinforcing the need for a strong, central authority, a divine ruler like Marduk, to keep that primal chaos at bay. This narrative gave people a framework for understanding their place in a universe that felt perpetually poised on the edge of disintegration, where civilization itself was a fragile victory wrested from the jaws of a dragon. The visual representation of Tiamat in ancient art is as complex as her role in the myth. She is often depicted as a massive, multi-headed dragon, sometimes with the forelegs of a lion, a symbol of her untamable ferocity. This fearsome image served as a constant reminder of the monstrous face of chaos that had to be defeated for life to exist. Yet, from a psychological perspective, Tiamat can be interpreted as a powerful symbol of the unconscious mind. The vast, dark, and potentially creative depths of the human psyche that exist before the light of consciousness and ego, represented by Marduk, impose order. To achieve a stable sense of self, the conscious mind must, in a sense, slay the boundless potential of the unconscious, structuring its raw energy into coherent thoughts and identities. This internal struggle mirrors the external cosmic battle, suggesting that the conflict between order and chaos is not just a story of the gods, but a fundamental process happening within each of us. In our modern era, Tiamat's story has been powerfully reclaimed and reinterpreted. particularly within feminist theology and mythology, where traditional patriarchal readings of the Enuma Elish cast Marduk as the heroic bringer of order. A feminist perspective often sees Tiamat as a tragic figure, the great mother whose body is violently dismembered by a new patriarchal world order. She becomes a symbol of the suppression of feminine power, the creative and generative force that was conquered and commodified to build a civilization dominated by male gods and kings. This reclaiming of Tiamat celebrates her as a symbol of feminine rage, creative potential, and the deep, chaotic wisdom that modern society often tries to repress. Her narrative resonates in movements that seek to restore balance by honoring the intuitive, the emotional, and the cyclical qualities historically associated with the feminine, and systematically devalued in favor of rational, linear, and dominating modes of thought. The influence of Tiamat's tale did not end in Babylon. It flowed westward, carried by trade routes and cultural exchange, seeding the ground for later dragon myths across Europe. The archetype of a chaotic, serpentine monster that must be slain by a culture hero or a saint to establish a new order is a recurring motif. While the specific details changed, the underlying structure, a hero battling a primordial serpent of chaos, can be seen as a distant echo of Marduk's victory over Tiamat. This cross-cultural flow of ideas demonstrates how a powerful foundational myth can transcend its origins, its core themes adapting to new landscapes and belief systems while retaining its essential power to explain the struggle between creation and destruction. So, what can this ancient story of a dragon's dismemberment possibly teach us about navigating our own lives today? Tiamat's story is a masterclass in the necessity of chaos for all true growth. It teaches us that order does not emerge from a vacuum, but is carved out of a tumultuous, pre-existing state. Just as the world was formed from Tiamat's body, our greatest personal transformations, creative breakthroughs, and societal advancements are often preceded by a period of intense disruption, a breaking down of old structures. The myth encourages a resilience that does not simply fear chaos, but understands it as the raw material from which new realities are forged. It asks us to find the courage to face our own personal Tiamats, the overwhelming projects, the life-altering crises, the periods of profound uncertainty, and to see them not as enemies to be avoided, but as the very substance from which we can build a stronger, more meaningful order. The story of Tiamat is a timeless reminder that within every ending, every breakdown, and every moment of sheer chaos lies the scattered pieces of a new beginning, waiting to be assembled into a form we have not yet dared to imagine. Imagine the warm, humid air of the Philippine night, carrying with it the rich scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, and then a new aroma cuts through the darkness, the distinct, pungent smell of tobacco smoke, seemingly coming from the very top of an ancient, towering ballied tree. If you were to look up, you might just make out the glowing ember of a cigar and the shadowy outline of a colossal figure lounging in the branches. This is the Kappa, a giant of Philippine folklore, a being as complex as the forests he calls home. He is not a straightforward monster of pure evil, but an enigmatic trickster and a potential mentor, a symbol of the deep, untamed mystery that resides within the oldest groves. His very presence, announced by that mysterious cigar smoke, teaches a fundamental lesson. The wilderness is not an empty space, but a place with its own rules and residents, and it demands a certain reverence from those who enter. The Kappa's origins are a fascinating tapestry woven from the deep threads of pre-colonial animism and the complex influences of Spanish rule. Long before the arrival of the Spanish, the various peoples of the Philippine archipelago held a worldview where spirits, known as Anito, inhabited all things, rocks, rivers, and especially ancient, magnificent trees. These trees were seen as sacred vessels of life and wisdom. The Kappa likely evolved from this belief, a powerful nature spirit that personified the formidable and watchful presence of the forest itself. With the arrival of Spanish colonialism and Catholicism, the mythology adapted and transformed. The Kappa's physical description, a giant, hairy, dark-skinned man often depicted wearing a loincloth called a bahag, may have been influenced by Spanish depictions of indigenous people, while his signature cigar is a clear import from the colonial period, a symbol that anchored the ancient spirit in the new, tangible world of trade and agriculture. This blending of indigenous belief and colonial imagery is meticulously documented in the folk collections of scholars like Maximo Ramos, who worked to preserve these stories. The Kappa, as we know him today, is a resilient cultural hybrid, a being who survived centuries of cultural change by adapting, proving that even under the pressure of a new dominant culture, ancient beliefs can endure by finding new forms. Anthropologist F. Lander Giacono profoundly observed that myths encode social values, and the Kappa is a perfect example of this principle in action. This towering figure served as a supernatural enforcer of community harmony and environmental respect. The tales told about him were not just for entertainment, they were vital tools for social conditioning. A story about a Kappa leading a greedy, boastful woodcutter in circles for hours until he was hopelessly lost and humbled was a powerful lesson in humility and against the arrogant exploitation of nature. Another tale where the Kappa rewards a lost but respectful and kind-hearted traveler by guiding them safely out of the forest reinforced the value of patience and good character. These narratives created a moral framework for interacting with the natural world and with each other, teaching that the forest, like the community, operates on a principle of reciprocity. Disrespect and greed are punished, while humility and kindness are sometimes rewarded, all under the watchful, smoky gaze of the giant in the trees. Visually, the Kappa is an unforgettable figure, defined by a few key characteristics that make his presence both terrifying and intriguing. He is always described as a giant, often between 7 and 15 feet tall, a scale that immediately establishes his power and otherworldliness. His skin is dark, sometimes as dark as midnight, allowing him to blend into the shadows of the forest. He is covered in hair, and his most famous trait is the large cigar he is perpetually smoking, its rich, aromatic smoke serving as the primary sign of his unseen presence. This aroma is not the harsh smell of a modern cigarette, but something deeper, earthier, and strangely alluring, a sensory beacon in the dark woods. The Kappa is most strongly associated with specific, massive trees, particularly the balit, a strangler fig known for its sprawling, aerial roots that create a labyrinthine and often haunting appearance. These ancient trees, some of them centuries old, are seen as the natural temples of the Kappa, his home and his throne. This specific association provided a clear, tangible focus for the myth, turning particular, real-world locations into places of power and caution. This tangible connection to specific trees made the Kappa an incredibly effective tool in parenting and community safety. For generations, Filipino parents have used the story of the Kappa to keep their children from wandering too far into the forest, especially at night. A simple warning, don't go near that big balit tree, a Kappa lives there and he might make you disappear, was far more effective and memorable than a lengthy explanation about the real dangers of getting lost or encountering wild animals. This practice, common in rural areas, functioned as a form of folk pedagogy, using the power of a compelling narrative to instill caution and respect for boundaries. It's a tradition that finds a direct parallel in modern urban legends, where stories about dangerous figures or haunted places often serve to keep people, especially the young, away from abandoned buildings, train tracks, or other potentially hazardous locations. Both the ancient and the modern story use fear and mystery not to paralyze, but to protect, encoding practical safety lessons within a memorable cultural narrative. In contemporary Philippines, the kappa has successfully made the leap from campfire story to beloved cultural icon, finding a vibrant new life in modern media. He appears in comics, television shows, and blockbuster films, often reimagined but always retaining his core identity as the giant of the forest. In some modern portrayals, he is a comedic figure, his tricks played for laughs. In others, he is a formidable guardian of nature, a symbol of ecological resistance against deforestation and urban sprawl. This modern resonance has, in a beautiful circular way, reinforced the kappa's original role as a protector of the environment. In some rural communities, the legend is actively invoked in local conservation efforts. When a particularly old and grand tree, especially a balit, is threatened by a development project, community elders might speak out, reminding everyone that the tree is the home of a kappa and that disturbing it would bring bad luck or divine retribution. This is not always a literal belief, but a powerful cultural argument for preservation, a way of saying that this tree is not just wood, but a vessel of history, story, and identity. The myth provides a language to fight for the intangible value of an ancient ecosystem, grounding the abstract concept of conservation in a character that everyone knows and understands. So, how does this specific myth of a cigar-smoking giant actively foster a sense of environmental stewardship? The kappa creates a relationship between people and the forest that is based on narrative and emotion, rather than just abstract policy. When a forest is seen as merely a collection of timber, its value is purely economic. But when it is understood as the home of the kappa, a being with personality, with rules, and with the power to reward and punish, it becomes a character in the story of the community. It becomes a neighbor. You do not simply clear-cut the home of a neighbor. You do not disrespect a place that has a name and a story. The kappa myth fosters stewardship by personifying the forest, giving it a voice and a presence that demands consideration. It teaches that the natural world is not a passive resource, but an active participant in our lives, one that we must engage with respectfully. This ancient form of ecological ethics, encoded in a folk tale, offers a timeless lesson that we are more likely to protect what we have a story for, what we see not as a thing, but as a being with its own inherent right to exist. But perhaps no creature in our entire journey so perfectly captures the theme of an inescapable, cyclical destiny as the one we encounter now, a being whose very body is wrapped around the entirety of the known world. In the cold, stark cosmos of Norse mythology, the great world serpent, Jörmungandr, lies in the depths of the ocean that encircles Midgard, the realm of humanity. So immense is its growth, spurred by the All-Father Odin who cast it into the sea, that it eventually grew to grasp its own tail in its mouth, forming a perfect, unbroken Ouroboros around the land. This stunning image is far more than a display of scale. It is the ultimate symbol of cyclical time and cosmic balance, a living, breathing loop that binds the world together, yet holds within its coils the promise of its eventual unraveling. For Jörmungandr is not merely resting, it is waiting, biding its time until the clarion call of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when it will rise from the ocean to engage in a final, fatal battle with its eternal rival, the thunder god Thor. The origins of this colossal being are chronicled in the foundational texts of Norse lore, the Poetic Edda and the later Prose Edda, written by the scholar Snorri Sturluson. Jörmungandr is one of the three monstrous children born from the union of the trickster god Loki and the giantess Angrboda, a lineage that immediately marks it as a force of primordial chaos, an entity inherently opposed to the ordered world the Aesir gods are trying to build. Alongside its siblings, the monstrous wolf Fenrir and the half-dead ruler Hel, the serpent represents the inevitable, chaotic forces that constantly challenge divine authority, the shadows that even the gods cannot fully dispel. Snorri himself described it as the greatest of serpents, a title that speaks not just to its physical size but to its immense mythological weight. For the Viking peoples, whose lives were intimately tied to the sea, Jörmungandr was a myth that powerfully blurred the line between story and reality. The terrifying vastness of the ocean, its hidden currents that could pull a ship off course, and the sudden, ground-shaking tremors of earthquakes were all seen as manifestations of the world serpent's restless stirrings in its aquatic prison. The myth gave a tangible, epic form to the very real and deadly natural phenomena these seafarers encountered daily. This intimate connection to the maritime world is brilliantly illustrated in one of the most famous tales involving the serpent, Thor's fishing trip with the giant Hymir. The story, recounted in the Eddic poem Heimisquitha, tells of how Thor, disguised as a young boy, goes fishing with the giant, using the head of Hymir's best ox as bait. He rows far out into the ocean, beyond where any sane sailor would dare, and casts his line. Jörmungandr takes the bait, and with a strength that defies belief, Thor hauls the monstrous serpent up to the side of the boat. The poem vividly describes the scene, the sea boiling, the serpent spewing venom, and Thor, with his feet braced against the hull, pulling the creature's head toward the surface, his hammer Mjolnir raised for the killing blow. It is a moment of supreme tension, the god of order poised to strike a decisive blow against the embodiment of chaos. At the last second, a terrified Hymir cuts the line, and the serpent sinks back into the depths, saving itself but ensuring the final confrontation is merely postponed. This story is a perfect example of how Norse myth mixed high adventure with profound cosmological themes. It was a tale told in mead halls that reinforced the Vikings' understanding of their world, a place of immense danger and heroic potential, where the gods themselves battled the very forces of nature they navigated every time they set sail. The cultural impact of Jörmungandr extended from oral poetry into the visual arts, where its formidable image was carved into stone for eternity. On runestones, such as the famous Altuna runestone in Sweden, we find depictions of this very fishing trip. Thor is shown standing in the boat, his foot crashing through the hull as he strains against the colossal serpent on his line. These carvings were not mere decoration. They were powerful statements of faith and identity, a way to invoke the god's strength and to acknowledge the ever-present threat of the world-encompassing chaos he fought. Beyond its artistic legacy, the world serpent holds a deep psychological resonance. It serves as a powerful symbol of inevitable change and the inescapable cycles of destruction and rebirth. Just as Jörmungandr circles the world, biting its own tail, so too do historical and personal cycles seem to repeat, building tension until a climactic event forces a dramatic transformation. The serpent represents all those looming, large-scale problems we know are coming but feel powerless to stop: the personal crises, the societal shifts, the environmental tipping points. Its eventual release at Ragnarok speaks to a universal understanding that systems, no matter how stable they seem, cannot contain opposing forces forever. Eventually, the pressure will become too great, and everything will be thrown into the crucible of change. It is this theme of unavoidable, systemic collapse that has made Jörmungandr an incredibly potent figure in modern storytelling, particularly in comics and films that explore apocalyptic themes. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the serpent appears as a fearsome antagonist, a force of pure destruction that Thor must confront. In other media, from video games to graphic novels, the world serpent is often used to represent existential threats on a global scale. Its image evokes a sense of a problem so vast it literally encircles the planet, a challenge that requires a heroic, perhaps even self-sacrificing, effort to overcome. This modern usage finds a startlingly relevant parallel in the discourse surrounding climate change. Like the slowly stirring Jörmungandr, The consequences of our environmental imbalance are a colossal, looming threat that we have been aware of for decades, a problem that circles the entire globe. The rising sea levels, intensifying storms, and shifting ecosystems are the modern-day equivalent of the serpent's venom and earth-shaking movements. The myth becomes a stark allegory for our current predicament. We have been fishing in dangerous waters for a long time, and now we can feel the line growing taut. The question is whether we, like Thor, will rise to the challenge with decisive action, or whether we will, like the terrified giant Hymir, cut the line through denial and inaction, ensuring a far more catastrophic confrontation when the serpent finally breaks the surface. So what does this ancient vision of a tail-biting world encircler ultimately reveal about how humanity has always viewed the great cosmic cycles? The enduring power of Jörmungandr lies in its embodiment of a truth that is both terrifying and comforting. It is terrifying because it acknowledges that the order we cherish, our civilizations, our personal lives, the very world we live on, is temporary, held in a fragile balance against forces of chaos that will one day be unleashed. Yet it is also comforting because within that very destruction lies the seed of renewal. The Norse myths are explicit that after Ragnarok, after the gods and monsters have slain each other, and the world is consumed by fire and water, a new, green world will emerge from the waves, and a new generation of gods and humans will inherit it. Jörmungandr is not the end of the story, but a necessary, cataclysmic turning point in an eternal cycle. This perspective challenges our modern, often linear, view of progress and disaster. It suggests that collapse and rebirth are not opposites, but partners in a continuous cosmic dance. The world serpent teaches us that our task is not to naively believe we can prevent all change, but to find the courage to face the inevitable cycles, to wrestle with the serpents of our age, and to have the wisdom to help shape what emerges from the flood. Having journeyed through the stories of these 24 extraordinary beings, from the two-headed serpent of ancient Greece to the world-encircling dragon of the Norse apocalypse, a profound pattern emerges from the tapestry. These creatures were never simple fantasies or mere flights of fancy. They are, and always have been, dynamic, living forces that actively shaped the very contours of human reality. They served as our first psychologists, giving form to the internal conflicts we could not yet name, like the Amphisbaena embodying our struggle with duality. They were our original moral philosophers, with figures like the Domovoy and the Kappa enforcing community values and environmental respect through narrative. Long before the scientific method, they were our pioneering naturalists, offering explanations for the terrifying and wondrous phenomena of the world, from the Thunderbird storms to the deceptive islands of the Aspidochelone. They built a vital bridge between the raw, empirical data of our senses and the deep, human need for meaning, transforming a chaotic universe into a world populated with beings we could understand, negotiate with, and even learn from. The great mythologist Joseph Campbell once described myths as clues to the spiritual potentialities of human life, and in every one of these forgotten creatures, we find a clue, a reflection of our universal fears, our highest hopes, and our endless, burning quest to understand our place in the cosmos. One of the most powerful recurring themes across cultures is the use of hybrid creatures as a way to process the shock of cultural encounters and the fear of the unknown. When a civilization expanded its horizons and met unfamiliar peoples and animals, the human mind often responded not with cold taxonomy, but with mythic synthesis. The manticore, with its human face, lion's body, and scorpion's tail, is a perfect example. It wasn't just a monster, it was a story the ancient Greeks and Persians told themselves about the perceived dangers and strangeness of the lands beyond their borders. Its hybrid form encapsulated the anxiety of encountering the other, blending the familiar, a human visage suggesting intelligence, with the terrifyingly alien. This process of creating composite beings allowed cultures to mentally digest and categorize the overwhelming newness of the world, placing the foreign into a narrative framework that, while often fearful, was at least comprehensible. Similarly, the Qilin, a beautiful fusion of deer, fish, and ox, served a different but related purpose in Chinese diplomacy, its harmonious form projecting an image of benevolent, virtuous power to neighboring states. These mythical hybrids were the original cross-cultural metaphors, demonstrating how we use story to navigate the complex and often unsettling space between us and them. Beyond explaining the foreign, these myths have consistently prefigured and even informed the development of modern scientific and philosophical thought. The legend of the salamander, born from observations of real amphibians fleeing fire, became a central symbol in alchemy, representing the transformative power of heat and the philosophical concept of an immutable substance surviving intense change, ideas that would later find echoes in the field of chemistry. The Aztec Cipactli, a primordial monster whose sacrificed body formed the world, is a stunning allegory for the cosmic cycles of destruction and creation, a concept that resonates with everything from the life and death of stars to the ecological principle of nutrient recycling. Even the Gashadokuro, the giant skeleton born from mass starvation, functions as a powerful, pre-sociological analysis of the consequences of social neglect and collective trauma. These stories were not wrong. They were the first drafts of human inquiry, using the language of symbol and narrative to explore principles that science would later describe with equations and data. They show that the drive to understand the world is a fundamental human impulse, and whether it is expressed through the image of a fiery lizard or the formula for combustion, the underlying curiosity is the same. The journey of these myths from ancient campfires to our modern digital screens is a testament to their incredible adaptability and enduring power. They began as oral traditions, told and retold by generations of storytellers, their details shifting with each telling to reflect the concerns of the time. They were then captured in the illuminated manuscripts of medieval bestiaries, where their allegorical meanings were refined for Christian moral instruction. They inspired the masters of the Renaissance, filled the pages of the Romantic poets, and fueled the imaginations of the first novelists. Today, this evolution continues at a breathtaking pace. The Krampus, once a regional alpine folk figure, has been resurrected as a global pop culture icon, his fearsome visage appearing in Hollywood movies and on trendy greeting cards as a critique of hyper-commercialized holidays and a symbol of our desire to reclaim the darker, more authentic textures of celebration. The Selkie's tragic story of stolen identity has been reinterpreted through a modern feminist lens in animated films like Song of the Sea, becoming a powerful metaphor for autonomy, cultural displacement, and the search for one's true self in a fragmented world. This digital migration doesn't dilute the myths, it revitalizes them, proving they are not static artifacts in a museum but living, breathing entities that constantly converse with the present. Ultimately, this collective journey invites a deeply personal question. How can we, here and now, actively engage with these ancient stories to enrich our own lives and navigate the complexities of the modern world? The answer lies in recognizing folklore as a practical toolkit for the soul. The psychological archetypes they represent are as relevant as ever. When we face an impossible choice, we can recall the Amphispina and embrace the duality of the situation, understanding that life is rarely about choosing between pure good and evil, but about navigating a spectrum of grays. When we feel the weight of anxiety or depression, the image of the catapult, its head dragged down by the weight of its own deadly gaze, can offer a powerful metaphor for our own experience, and its eventual defeat a symbol of hope. On a societal level, the Thunderbird's call for environmental reverence and the Taniwha's role in protecting sacred land offer a blueprint for a more sustainable and respectful relationship with our planet. We can engage with these myths by seeking them out, by understanding their cultural contexts, and by allowing them to spark our own creativity and empathy. They remind us that the challenges we face, be they personal, social, or global, are part of a much older, grander human story. By listening to these forgotten beings, we are not escaping reality, but equipping ourselves with a deeper, more nuanced, and profoundly human way of living within it. And so our journey ends, but the map we have drawn together is far from complete. We have ventured from the deepest river valleys to the highest mountain peaks, from the hearth of the Slavic home to the celestial throne of the Thunderbird, meeting 24 guides along the way. Each one, from the hopeful Caladrius to the primordial Tiamat, has offered us a unique lens through which to see our world and ourselves. They have not simply told us stories, they have taught us how to listen to the wind, how to respect the forest, how to face the darkness, and how to find balance within chaos. These forgotten creatures are not dusty artifacts in a museum of the mind. They are living, breathing reflections of the human spirit's endless quest for meaning, proving that myth and reality are not two separate lands, but a single, intertwined landscape, constantly reshaping one another. The great writer J.R.R. Tolkien once offered a key to understanding this when he wrote that myth is not a lie, but a language to express truths. These 24 beings are part of that universal vocabulary, a grammar of symbols that allows us to articulate our deepest fears, our most profound hopes, and our timeless wonder at the mystery of existence. They show us that the stories we tell are not escapes from reality, but profound engagements with it, shaping our ethics, our art, and our very understanding of what it means to be human in a vast and often bewildering cosmos. As we bring this exploration to a close, I invite you to carry a piece of this map with you. Let these myths be more than just a memory. Let them be a source of inspiration. Perhaps the resilience of the salamander, born from fire, will remind you of your own capacity to transform adversity into strength. Maybe the haunting call of the selkie will encourage you to reconnect with your most authentic self, no matter how far from home you may feel. The fierce guardianship of the Taniwha and the Leshy could ignite a fresh passion for protecting the wild places in your own community. These ancient narratives hold a practical wisdom, a toolkit for the soul that is as relevant in our modern, digital age as it was around a flickering campfire 1,000 years ago. The conversation does not have to end here. I am genuinely curious to know which of these 24 beings resonated most deeply with you. Was it the tragic romance of the selkie, the righteous fury of the Gashadokuro, or the cosmic balance of Jörmungandr? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this adventure together as a community of curious minds. And if you enjoyed this journey into the blurred boundaries of our world, consider subscribing to the channel for more explorations into the mysteries that connect us across time and culture. Thank you for your time, for your curiosity, and for joining me on this incredible expedition. May these forgotten creatures, once lost to the shadows of time, now find a new home in your imagination, continuing to spark wonder, fuel creativity, and remind you that the world is still full of magic, waiting only